Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome you to the meeting of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee of Tuesday, the 11th of November. Can I remind members that the meeting is being recorded and will subsequently be available for public consumption online. Could also remind members that at 11 a.m. today, I'll obviously be pausing the meeting in order to hold a 2-minute silence in remembrance of those who lost their lives in armed conflict serving our country. So I'll stop the meeting at 11 o'clock for that. Could also highlight something to members, mainly the success of the recent business week that the department held. A number of members have been aware that somewhere in the region of 20 events were held right across the region, which engaged somewhere in the region of 500 businesses. Now, those events were obviously led by the council in partnership with Business Gateway, Food and Drink Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, and the various chambers of commerce. And I think the event itself, or the events themselves, were a huge success, really engaging local businesses. And I think it would be important to place on record our thanks to the economic development team for the success of that week, and obviously something we want to continue in the future. And myself and the leader attending a number of those events, and the feedback we've had from businesses as a result of the support that have been given was really positive, and I think it does strengthen an engagement with the business community. So I do want to place on record our thanks to the team for organising what was a really successful week. Okay, can we turn to today's very short agenda? Item number 1, do we have any apologies?
Good morning. We have 17 members present, and I have apologies from Councillors Groom and Councillor Mail. Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Dempster are not present. They may be along in a moment.
Okay, I think Jim is currently across the road at a planning hearing and may appear at some point, depending on how long he's grilled for there. Okay, any other apologies? No? Okay, can we turn to item 2, declarations of interest? Any declarations? No. Okay, item number 3 is the minute of the EEI committee of the 9th of September. Are members happy this is a true record of the meeting? Yep, Jeff moving and Ronnie seconding. Yep, agreed. Okay. Item number 4, the minute of the meeting held on the 2nd of October. Again, are members happy it's a true record? Yep, okay, thanks very much. And finally, the minute of the Housing Subcommittee meeting of the 26th of September. Obviously, a slightly different meeting because obviously it was convened and continued at a second date. So some members were obviously present at the start and some members were present at the second part of the meeting. But the members of the Housing Subcommittee happy that the meeting was a true record? Those that were in attendance in both, of course. Alistair?
No, thanks, Chair. No, I'm not, because I think at 3.2 it was suggested, in fact, Chair, that that's on page 16, that we scrutinise the main key findings and recommendations of the regulator's thematic study and housing options going forward. The way that report reads, the way the minute reads, we did it on the day. We didn't do it on the day, sir. The suggestion was, in fact, that it would be helpful to do that going forward.
Okay, I wasn't present by the time we got to that item on the agenda, so I'm looking at whether the chair of the committee or any other members have any other recollections of the meeting. So what are you suggesting that should be changed to, Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. I'm suggesting, sir, that, to say at the moment, to say as the minute says that, we scrutinised the main key findings. We didn't. The intention was made clear we should be doing, and the undertaking, as I understood it, was that we would do this going forward.
Okay, so do you have an amendment to the minute?
Well, I will move so that the paragraph 3.2, with your leave, obviously, is imprecise in that it was noted the range of challenges facing housing options and homeless services summarised at section 3.4 of the report, and it was appreciated that the main key findings and recommendations of the regulator's thematic study on housing options would be scrutinised going forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. We did note and scrutinise the main, but in my recollection it was ongoing scrutiny.
Okay, so there'll be ongoing scrutiny going forward, effectively, is what you're... Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would probably concur with that. The point of this report was to take a review of the housing options forward, and throughout that review period, then members would be scrutinising it at various points throughout the review period.
Okay, so we can amend. Finlay?
Thanks, Chair. It's actually a question on the minutes.
Okay, well, we'll deal with this just first, just we're happy with the change. So effectively we're amending it to say, noted that there will be ongoing scrutiny of the main key findings, etc. Members happy with that? Through the review process, yeah. Okay. Members happy with the rest of the minute? Finlay, you got a question, did you say?
Thanks, Chair. It was actually the previous minutes, I missed it. On page number 5, it was agreed to receive a report to the November meeting about future applications to the Council's wind farm community benefit policy. It's obviously not in the papers, just wondered why there's a further delay to this.
I think that the actual Council's advice, I think, was only received last week. So I think Thursday was only received on Thursday, so there's not been time to put a report, but there will be a report to the January committee on that. The legal advice has now been received. Okay, so with that amendment, we're happy to agree the Housing Subcommittee meeting minutes. Okay, turning to item number 6. This is the revenue monitoring report. Could I ask the Director if he has anything he wishes to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members? Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I just wonder on 3.1, how if we've still got 82,000 to measures to be identified, how we get to a break-even position before we've done that.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. This is an improvement on the previous report. The September report advised that we had measures to be identified of £119,000, so it is an improved position. And we, as a management team, are doing everything possible to address that deficit, to bring it down to a break-even position, and we're very confident that that would be the case. Our planning fee income has improved, and that's very encouraging. We have a further 5% increase in planning fees, which commences on the 1st of November, and we haven't actually factored that into our predictions going forward, so that will improve the situation further, we hope. So we will keep a very close eye on this, monitoring it at our management team meetings to ensure we break even. We had a similar profile last year, and we did come in on a break-even budget.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Well, would it not be, from a process point of view, a truer representation of an 82,000 overspend at this point, if we haven't yet identified these measures? I do appreciate what the Director's saying in terms of the service's ability to balance it, but from a scrutiny point of view, I would have suggested that an 82,000 overspend would be a truer representation.
I mean, I personally wouldn't agree, because I think what we have to do is distinguish between where we think there will be an overspend and where we are confident there won't be an overspend. Now, on a £27 million budget, if come November the department can find ongoing savings of £82,000, and I think it's got a problem, but I think we have to be able to distinguish between where we're actually being told there is going to be an overspend because the department cannot find those savings, and where we think that those savings can be found. You know, because you could have a potential situation where the first week into a budget, after April, it has a projected overspend purely on the basis of 1 or 2 weeks spending. So what you do is you multiply that by 52 and say there's going to be an overspend of £500,000 when you know, frankly, that's not going to be the case. So I think we do have to distinguish between the accountancy projection of £82,000 overspend and whether or not realistically there will actually be an overspend. I think that's important that we do that from a financial point of view. Members, I think, need to be flagged up when there will be an overspend, and then we need to consider whether that needs to basically be dealt with, or simply, or the £82,000 will be dealt with. And you know, as I say, I don't think if the department can't deal with £82,000 with a £27 million budget, I think it does have an issue. So I do think there is a need to distinguish between the two. It might very well be that we just maybe have more detail, I suppose, in the reports as to why we're confident that that £82,000 can be found. Maybe that's the answer, but I do think we have to distinguish between the two. Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, because I think I ask this every report, but you know, you've got to welcome that the reduction in forecast of under recovery for the planning application fees and building warrants. Is the reason we're under recovering, is it because the number of applications are actually coming forward, or that the department are these applications are not being processed as quickly as possible? What is actually the reason for the under recovery?
The reason for the under recovery is purely the volume of applications we're getting. You know, the economy has not yet turned around, therefore the level of applications we're getting, both for planning and for building standard, is not as high as it was, and that's the reason. Whenever you make your application, you pay the fee. It's nothing to do with staff performance, which for the second quarter has actually been very good.
Can I just ask about, it's on page 22 and it's under the expenditure thing, and it's payment to others, which is, you know, it's a very large amount. Is that's presumably DG first, but I'm just wondering who else?
That includes the waste PFI, which is almost £8 or £9 million a year. So that's payments to others, that's to a private sector partner.
How's it broken down then?
Right. Well, that's all detailed in the ABB. If you look at that, payments to other bodies, it gives you line by line what we actually expend with others. What I'll do is I'll get a copy of that and maybe pass it to you. Right.
Okay, any other members? Okay. Sorry, Ian. Yeah.
Just a quick comment in regards to, I think it's really well done. I think it has to be said, maybe you've touched on it briefly. I did pick up on what Ian, Councillor Dick said as well in regards to 82, but I think that's acceptable. You're absolutely right in your comments when you say that the size of the budget that's actually being looked after here, £82,000, even if it was to be looked upon as an overspend, still couldn't really be criticised. So we're certainly as a group are happy with it.
Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations? Are members happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? Okay, can we turn to item number 7? Okay, members, this is the Economic Development Fleet Infrastructure and Whitesands Monitoring Report for 2014-15, as well as the proposals for the programme going forward from 2015-18. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report?
There's nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members for questions? Jane.
Have I got this right, that we're doubling the amount of money being allocated to the Whitesands project? The proposal is that we double this year's allocation.
Yeah, the proposal was from, I think, 250 to 450.
Yes.
Well, that's certainly the ask. Obviously, that'll have to go to Policy and Resources on the 18th of November, I think, in order to agree that, but that's certainly what the ask is.
And, Chairman, then, can I ask you then how we propose to keep a handle on this? This is the sort of project that grows arms and legs. And I think this committee has got to keep a really fierce control on what is proposed, because you get into the situation where you advance so far and you find yourself then unable to retract if it's not the right thing to do. So I just want to be absolutely sure that we will monitor this on a very regular basis and know for sure on a step-by-step basis what has been added in as we go. It's not that I want to stop the thing, I just want to be absolutely clear that we know, because we know that we can do this quite easily, is to go into projects which get bigger and bigger without really considering each step.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a report coming to the January committee updating members on the Whitesands scheme itself. Obviously, this funding is is the design work around the project. I think the message from Scottish Government was very clear that we had to get it to a particular stage before we bidded for funding, but clearly nothing can happen on the ground until we receive funding from the Scottish Government. I mean, it's a £12 million plus project. We're asking the Scottish Government for £9 million of that, but we do have to get it to a particular stage. I would ask Stephen if he wants to add anything as to what the specific £200,000 is, but I think it will be very clear we can't begin work on the ground until we secure that funding from the Scottish Government.
I think just the report points out the initial estimate of the funding for this year. We have increased that, and we're seeking to increase that through this committee's approval, and then subsequently to Policy and Resources. To a certain extent, the work that's been gone forward this year on the project has been a bit about tying down the design that's come out through the public consultation and the charrette process, but also actually looking at, to a certain amount, there has been a bit of project creep in terms of the scope of the project has changed slightly. We've looked at the possibility of providing a higher level of protection for some additional cost in terms of responding to concerns on insurance after the scheme's in place on properties, businesses and residential properties. We've also changed the kind of scope of the scheme in terms of potential objections that we want to see off when we actually move to the formal consultation phase. So what we're looking to do, and certainly looking to do for this committee to approve, is that we accelerate some of that scheme cost into this financial year to let us take forward. We'd like to consider the design shortly as being effectively tied down, and we would like to go forward in terms of the formal consultation process in the new year on the basis of that design being tied down, and that's the funding that's required just to complete and take us forward to a stage where we would then have a robust scheme should Scottish Government come to us in the near future or within the next financial year seeking a bid for additional funding, for support funding.
Thanks very much indeed, sir. A couple of questions, if I may, and then perhaps maybe an observation. First question, Chair, paragraph 3.20, references made to Scottish Power contractors no longer undertaking substantive works in certain communities, two in particular in Mid-Galloway, Whithorn and Wigtown. Bearing in mind that we're having a further meeting with Scottish Power representatives and Community Council representatives, Chair, a week on Wednesday the 19th, it would be helpful to get some background as to just exactly what is meant by that. It's alluded to as well, Chair, later on in the report. The other one, sir, is in relation, flood mitigation measures are mentioned here. It's in relation to certain communities in a Mid-Galloway perspective, but I'd be quite content to leave these until item number 11 with your leave, sir, and deal with them under PVAs, the potentially vulnerable areas. I'm talking, for the record, about sort of Cree Valley, Newton Stewart, Garlison and Isle of Whithorn, both of which, of course, are coastal flooding issues, the latter two. With your leave, I'd be grateful, sir, if you would. And the other one, Chair, paragraph 3.24, I'll frame it as a question if you want. Why, when we're looking at projects such as this, do we not make sure, Chair, that we've got the agreement of the relevant landowners in the bag before, in fact, we find ourselves hung out to dry, if I can use that colloquialism? I know that the circumstance, I mean, I've already spoken to Mr. Speedy and to certain members of his staff on more than one occasion about this, Chair. To me, it's simple, it makes eminent sense that you get some form of agreement entered into with the relevant landowners in question. I do appreciate, Chair, that circumstances here are somewhat unusual in that one of the landowners is not happy about the way or the impact that the LDP is having in him and certain of his property interests. Now, I know, sir, it's a bit of a non sequitur, but his attitude would appear to be that, well, okay, if I'm not happy in that regard, you ain't getting your land, as it were, with a view to taking this worthwhile project forward. And I think that if we had, that could have been avoided if we'd had the agreement of the landowners in the bag, Chair, before the issue about the LDP came up. So, as I say, if I'd be grateful to get some form of response, to the first question and to the last one, with your leave. Thank you. Stephen?
If I can just come back, yes. On the LED street lighting spend to save programme, the feedback we're getting from the lighting engineer is that what he tries to do in terms of identifying the next areas for investment is actually, amongst other things, is trying to coordinate with works that Scottish Power would be required to do to provide power to the lighting columns. And the feedback we're getting there is that in terms of the planning for that, it would be better if we could delay those particular installations to LED there is some advanced partial works that he can carry out in those areas, but it would be better for him to delay it to the following year to coincide or to coordinate better with Scottish Power's works. Exactly what the Scottish Power works, I don't have details on, but I can certainly get the lighting engineer to contact you if that's useful for more information for your subsequent meeting with Scottish Power, and we'll take a note to do that if that's agreeable to the member. On the last part, in terms of the agreement of landowners, it is something that we have possibly kind of unstuck on before, particularly with our kind of active travel projects where we're looking for agreement or way leaves to use land, or we're looking at purchase of land. To a certain extent, these agreements with landowners kind of move forward on the basis of a verbal agreement, especially when we have the opportunity, and we had the opportunity here with Sederunt to have the opportunity to submit a bid and to seek funding, and that was certainly the basis that we would generate schemes quite quickly where we could see that they were agreeable. And to some extent, we probably generate and bid for more schemes than we might get funding for, or could deliver within any one financial year. So we have to kind of program smooth the resources over a number of years. And it is unfortunate in this situation that the landowner has decided that he's not agreeable to letting us progress with the scheme and the works that we had envisaged and we had bid into with Sederunt due to his views on issues with the local development plan and how that's gone forward.
Alistair?
Thanks very much, Chair. Can I say that I'm grateful for the responses, but can I ask, Chair, for the assurance on appropriate future occasions and projects of this type that we do take the elementary precaution of getting something reduced to writing with the relevant landowners in question, because this has really put the kibosh for the foreseeable future in what would have been a very good project for the people in Newton Stewart's Chair. Apart from that, I'm grateful to Stephen for his responses. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alistair. Patsy?
Thank you. It's to do with problems at Kirkcudbright Harbour. And I just wonder, you're talking about on page 28, 313, there seems to be quite a lot of problem with the wall, and you say you're going to bring back a detailed review to this committee at the earliest opportunity. I just wondered when that will be, because I think, as we all know, Kirkcudbright Harbour is a very well-used harbour, and we don't want anything to prevent use of that. So I just wondered. And also you say below there the key issues is the onshore power supply. So we're obviously having problems in Kirkcudbright at the moment in more than one way. Like some reassurance, please.
I think just taking the last point first, the onshore power supply was a bit of a project we looked at putting the increased capacity in three-phase supply in at Kirkcudbright Harbour to remove the situation where trawlers were having to bring in generators to power up their ships and creating pollution. And we did have the opportunity at quite short notice in the past year to draw down some Scottish Government funding in relation to that. So we kind of pushed forward with a bid on that quite quickly. The issues we have there with Scottish Power are certainly not insurmountable. It just kind of delays the project. We're certainly doing the advanced works for that, but what we're taking through and are in consultation with our colleagues in Property and Architectural Services is a report. Scottish Power actually, to put in a substation, need to own the land, the footprint that they want to put the substation on. So we're selling them a square piece of land for them to be able to do that and install the substation as part of the works. So that's what has introduced the delay in the project, but we're certainly pushing that forward and see the benefit and keeping Scottish Government in the frame in terms of when we would look to draw down the co-finance, the funding on that valuable project. On the issue with the quay wall at Kirkcudbright Harbour, it's certainly been something that has been monitored or been observed over a period of time. It's possibly not a dissimilar situation to that which we experienced at Stranraer, where ultimately we predict the worst case scenario is that there could be a failure of the quay wall, and there's been intervention at Stranraer where we put the rock armour in on a 30-metre section that failed, and then the contract, which is just about complete on the whole 90-metre section of the quay wall, replacing that and strengthening that. So it's possibly a similar scenario at Kirkcudbright. We've asked Engineering and Design to carry out a bit more site investigation work to find out what the conditions are behind the quay wall. It has been a situation we've been monitoring because we realised there was settlement on one of the outfall pipes. There seemed to have been washout of fines behind the quay wall, but now we're seeing that is actually causing deformation on the quay wall itself, and that ultimately What we would envisage doing is that we would hope to come back to the next committee in January with a bit more detail in the capital monitoring report and just how we want to take that forward. At the same time, we're trying to work out how we just quantify the extent of the works that are required so that we can then start to think about trying to get into the capital investment strategy with a bid, because it will be quite substantial works and certainly a lot more than our current coastal infrastructure programme at about 170 is the kind of baseline budget, and that it would be certainly would be greater than that. So we would be looking for some way to bid into any additional capital funding.
Patsy, yeah.
Just on the effect of the actual workings of the harbour, how would it impact on that?
In terms of the works, the remedial works that would be carried out, I would imagine we would probably want, given that it's quite a busy harbour, there's probably a lot less space than we have at Stranraer to move vessels about and move functions about. Again, it's something we'd need engineering design to advise us on, but I wonder if we could phase the work so that we don't completely close down. We work in one half of the harbour or the other as we move through the works, and we would probably target the works at the most critical section, which might be a bit of a problem if it's determined to be the centre section. But I think we would need to work round with any contractor how we keep the harbour functioning.
Okay, Jeff, and then I've got Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the Whitesands project at 317 and the change from the 1 to 25 to the 1 to 75 year event? I assume that the original plans, which went out to the charrette, etc., were all based on the 1 to 25. And I'm a bit concerned that it does say in the second bullet point that moving to a 1 to 75 year option may provide a better benefit cost ratio. I would hope it would definitely provide a better benefit rate ratio if we're actually going to base any future designs on that. And Mr. Hurriot says that they want the design tied down before it goes out to public consultation. In this respect, who's going to actually tie this design down? Because I'm conscious once again of the Burns Statue Square, where we thought we had the design tied down and the direction of the bus circulation was suddenly reversed in the final proposals, which caused a lot of problems. So are we in a position to address all these difficulties which we found in previous projects, and will these all be taken into account?
Just before you answer that question, members, could I ask you all to be upstanding for that 2-minute silence? James or Stephen, take on Jeff's point there.
Okay. In terms of the design for the Whitesands project and tying it down, I think with a lot of the early consultation on the project, there's been a lot of the scheme has evolved, and certainly through this year, there have been some significant changes, and one of those changes would be that realising that we probably could get a level of protection that was a bit higher with only a kind of, relatively modest increase in project cost. What we're planning on doing in terms of consultation, we're working this out in terms of how we take it forward, but we would plan to come back to the January EEI committee with the scheme detail and inform members on how the design had effectively developed. We would like to consider at this point in terms of managing the development costs that we've kind of locked down the design for now. We feel the design has progressed, or certainly when we're complete that phase, we will have progressed far enough that we can then go with a robust scheme to Scottish Government through the statutory process and seek to obtain a confirmed scheme. The detail that we put forward for that won't in itself necessarily tie down the scheme, but the likes of the footprint and the levels will become critical, and the cross sections that we put forward will become critical to be realised, so that we actually have a design that complies with the order and the confirmed scheme that we would seek to promote. There would still be opportunity for detail to change, and to a certain extent some of those changes that have come in this year that we'll bring back to members with more detail in January, and anything that happens in the future would be very much in response to dealing with the potential objections that might arise as we go through the statutory process. If there's something we can do quite simply without a significant cost, it might be useful to do that and to avoid an objection at an inquiry. So to a certain extent, the scheme design will be tied down as we move into the statutory phase. Some of the detail still has the potential to move forward, but it certainly would be our intention to bring the scheme detail to members to this committee in January, and then we would look at possibly another phase of public consultation, less consultation and more informing the public that this is the agreed scheme. There's been the consultation in the past, this has been the response, and this is the scheme that we would like to take forward. And in advance of that, we're probably quite keen, in advance of the January meeting, a report to this committee on the scheme. We'd probably like to get to Nithsdale Area Committee, and we're looking at dates in December for that, to look at a community meeting, just to give the heads up to interested parties on how the scheme design has evolved. Probably let James come in here on the benefit cost ratio. But again, that's part of the detail that we would, when seeking approval from this committee to agree the scope of the scheme in detail in January, that we should be able to cover.
Chair, yeah, in terms of benefit cost, the way the scheme progresses for future funding from Scottish Government, we would need to show a positive cost-benefit ratio. That looks at the costs of the scheme in terms of the construction costs in comparison to the benefits in terms of reduced flood risk to the properties that are defended. As you'll appreciate, if we can increase the protection offered at a minimal cost, so for example, if you build a wall, there's a lot of money in building the foundations of the wall and then building the wall. By adding on a certain height to that wall, you can reduce the likelihood of flooding for a small cost. Then the ratio of benefits, i.e. the amount of protection offered against cost, the cost of the scheme increases. So you might spend £1 million on a scheme and protect £2 million worth of property. By spending another 50,000 on the scheme, you protect £2.5 million worth of property. Your ratio of cost against benefits improves, and therefore, it's more worthwhile doing the scheme. So that's how we would develop the optimum. And a lot of schemes, not necessarily always, particularly the Whitesands, but I mean, schemes are often nationwide looking at the optimum cost-benefit ratio, which may not be the largest benefit, may not be the 1 in 200 year level of protection. It may be a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 50. The additional cost in going up may not be beneficial.
Can I just come back and touch that? Obviously, this is a very sensitive scheme, and it's not just the cost benefits in terms of pounds, it's also the aesthetics as well, because we have agreed as a committee and as a council that the NIF is a benefit to the centre of Dumfries, and we've also agreed in the past that what we don't want to do is to canalise the river. And obviously, you could keep pushing the height of the banking up and reduce the risk of flooding, but you're losing a benefit to the town centre. So I hope we will take that into account as well.
Very much so, and it's been an important part of my involvement in the scheme is to avoid the separation of the town from the river. And with the design that's proposed in terms of the embankment and access along the embankment, the riverside path, for example, won't change, so there'll still be the access to the river from that. But the parking wouldn't be behind you when you're looking at the river, it would be an embankment with views from the embankment. We are progressing an environmental impact assessment, which is obviously a requirement of the scheme, and that's based upon looking at the various return periods and the impacts of providing a 1 in 75-year level of protection. So these things are being considered, in the understanding that yes, there is an impact from whatever scheme we promote.
I take on board the point Jeff makes about the importance of members, obviously being absolutely clear what the scheme is going to be, and obviously there'll be a report coming to Nistelera Committee in December, and then subsequently to this committee. But I wonder if maybe an opportunity just to build into the diary, an opportunity for members to come along and actually look at some of the design work that's been done so far, just so that members are aware of what we're talking about in terms of the height, etc. I think the last thing we want to do is get to January and members say, actually, I don't like that after all. So I think it's important for members maybe to be given the opportunity to go along and have a look at that. And actually, I think the opportunity to start dispelling some of the myths that are out there regarding the actual project itself. But I think maybe just building an opportunity for members to come along and actually see some of the detailed design work, just to see what the difference is between the sort of original idea around 1 in 25 and the revised scheme of 1 in 75. I think that might be an opportunity. So we don't want a situation where it's presented to members in January and you suddenly say, actually, that's too much, basically. So it'd be good if we can do that. Okay, I've got Craig, then Jim, and then Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just seeking a bit of clarity, actually, on 3.38, the roads lighting. And I'm just wondering, is this a completely separate issue to the streetlight spend to save programme, and how they possibly link in with each other? And after that, just to follow up as to how we've managed to get into the stage where we have such a substantial backlog in this programme as well, please.
That section of the report, just to be clear, is looking at the funding going forward. And we're trying to do two things with this report, is actually monitor the in-year spend. What we've been asked to do so that certain reports can be taken to Policy and Resources next week is also just to re-advise members of what the baseline funding is for the infrastructure asset class. What the baseline funding of about £9 million actually is normally allocated to. Decisions for this committee on that allocation are usually taken in January and March of the financial year, so the detail on that will come to members. So what we're saying is that the kind of baseline funding of £9 million normally results in an allocation of about £0.47 million to the road lighting programme. And that is completely separate to the spend to save programme, which is looking at replacing the lanterns themselves with the LED units. This is a programme that has been going on for a number of years and is really looking at the annual uplift in the condition of the lighting columns themselves. So maybe less to do with the lanterns, which the spend to save programme is dealing with, and more to do with the columns and their safety and when their kind of life expired. I think the level of backlog that we've calculated, about £4 million, is and I'm not aware that it has changed significantly over the years, but that has always been the backlog in that programme. To address that, it might be that members decide to increase the kind of intervention rate on that out of the £9 million infrastructure asset class baseline budget. It might be that members make a decision in March to move more funding into that out of somewhere else. But it's really balancing the condition of the road lighting stock and the backlog there against the need for investment in the other assets, including the road, including the structures, and really everything that's listed there within the infrastructure programme. So it's more about what the baseline funding is for members and views on reports that come to Policy and Resources and the budget process that we're running through at the current time.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. 3.12, further additional payment of £500,000 from the Scottish Government funding was approved at this committee on the 13th of May for adverse weather damage that occurred late December 13 and January 14. However, at that same meeting, approximately 425 of that 500,000 was moved from repair and damage at the A716 Stay Bay and diverted to the Stranraer Harbour. my question would be, did the Scottish Government actually know that? The second one, 3.49, the Colstay works. Following meeting of this committee, I asked for assurances that all the work that required to be carried out on a 716 would be carried out during this financial year and the next 2 financial years, i.e. a 3-year work programme, and I was assured that it would be. However, at 3.2 now, it does not make clear, in fact, it actually suggests that we are now having to request additional funding to complete this work over a 4-year period, including this financial year. As far as I'm concerned, that road and all the work that needs done to shore it up needs done as quickly as possible. Also, the cost of that repair was originally given as 705,500. But when you add up what we're already spending this year and what we're asking for in extra capital, it looks as if it's going to cost about £1 million over the 4 years. Can somebody explain that one to me, how there's such a big difference? Also, 3.21, regarding the spend to save on the light columns. Have all the towns and the villages in and around the boundary of the dark skies been completed? And if not, why were the Annandale lights changed before the ones in the dark skies part? And again, I'm sorry to bring this up again, the table that's in 3.26, I saw that about 3 or 4 times. I've asked on at least more than one occasion, can somebody please explain to me, of that investment, how much is over and above the remains of the 2.427 million that is already ring-fenced for Stranraer? And I noticed on page 37, right at the top of the page, we're still spending money in the West Pier. What are we spending money in the West Pier on? I thought that was completed.
Right. A number of questions there. I'll try and work my way through them before we come to the kind of economic development issues and maybe ask Ewan to respond to some of those. At 3.12, we talk about the £500,000 funding from Scottish Government, which was given in relation to adverse weather. We'd actually bid for about £1 million worth of funding, and as I recall, the projects that we listed and did take forward certainly covered more than the £500,000 that we got from Scottish Government. So the funding that they gave us was spent on the projects that we had bid for, if not all of the projects that we had bid for, which was why there was some less amount spent on the Kilstay Bay works. The works required over the next 2 years were showing in the table for the infrastructure as part of the additional funding request on coastal infrastructure at table 4. And I think you're right. I'll need to check why the totals. It seems to be that the total shown in the 15-16 to 17-18 probably equate to closer to the scheme budget, but don't take into account the works that we've undertaken this year. So I'll check on those figures before we progress with that through the capital investment strategy to work out why it seems to be higher when we take into account the works we've already taken forward this year. And we'll look at the programme. Certainly what we've agreed with colleagues in engineering design, carrying out the design and the inspections of the works taken forward this year were the critical works required to make safe and to retain the road. And that once those works were done, we would look in detail at the works over the future financial years in order to complete the complete range of works that we had additionally identified out of the £700,000 scheme. 3.21, the lighting columns, I'll get, yes, on the spend to save for the lighting columns. I can certainly check with the lighting engineer. That was certainly one of his priorities, was to complete the dark skies areas. But I can come back to you on that. And I would imagine we're going to confirm that is the case, but wouldn't want to do that just now without getting that confirmed.
Any of these points?
Just to save them floating about, can I come back, Stephen, on one? It's regarding the money for the Colstay Bay, as you'll no doubt be aware. The total funding, etc., that was put together, it was only the Colstay Bay works. that lost money. 425,000. There was none of the other damage that was diverted or delayed. It was only 425,000 that was taken from the A716 and given to the Stranraer Harbour. Now, I don't have a problem with Stranraer Harbour wall being fixed. However, the A716 is a lifeline rural road. There is no real proper diversion round about that road that is actually suitable for heavy goods vehicles or even large vehicles.
Don't know much you can add to your previous answer, but is there anything you want to add to that, Stephen?
Just, I mean, it was a decision of this committee in terms of allocating the funding in that way.
That's correct, yeah. On the economic development side of things, do you want to add anything to that?
On the two issues, the funding for West Pier is retention from the works contract carried forward. And the second issue is, I think you asked about the funding allocated in 15, 16, 16, 17. That's not part of the 2.47 million. That's additional funding that was allocated by committee.
Jim?
No, that's fine. I just wanted an official answer to that one. As regards the May committee, unfortunately, I was otherwise detained elsewhere, so I couldn't attend. I'm aware that the decision was made.
Absolutely. I've gave you an official answer several times to that question, I have to say. Okay, I've got Ian next.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to come back to just briefly a couple of things. One's economic development, but maybe you could answer that, Chairman, in regards to page 30, table, paragraph 3.26. There's a deficit, I would say, in regards to Annandale and Eskdale through CORES over the next 2 years. Certainly next year and the year after that would be certainly up for budget proposals, but there's no investment proposed at all in regards to CORES. Duty's not on there at all, but I would imagine that's for the Duty members to pick up on. But in regards to going back to 2.3 of the recommendations, and that refers to 3.17, and the additional work that's been required there for the £200,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, the sixth bullet point down refers to the 2009 Act, and I think that's primarily that's changed the reflection in regards to how this is going forward. So what I'm trying to get an understanding, Chairman, is what's the real changes? Why have we looked at a £250,000 package initially, looked at this and thought that was sufficient in regards to working up the proposals on the Whitesands. That's been added on, referred to the 2009 Act, which was 5 years ago. So what are the changes? I think we've maybe touched on a couple of, as we went through. So, and what is the likelihood, in all fairness, and I think I'd like, again, as good an answer as I get, in Scottish Government, you said it, you've outlined it clearly earlier, 75% we're looking for them to fund on this project in Whitesands. What's the likelihood in regards to the conversations we've already had with Scottish Government? They're aware of this project, how we're moving forward, of them actually coming up with that level of funding.
In terms of the first point, the CORES project, I think that the key point is we're obviously going to consider a report further on the agenda to bring forward funding from future years to the Gretna Central Avenue Public Realm Scheme. So that will obviously significantly increase that by the region of £400,000. The other key point, of course, is that in 2017-18, there was an allocation indicatively of £1.5 million for economic development programmes. Members obviously haven't decided what that should be spent on, and obviously as groups take their budget forward, they'll have to set out proposals, because obviously the revenue and capital budget now come together, so any proposals on how that money should be spent need to be contained within groups' budget. So whatever particular projects groups wish to take forward, they'll have to consider as part of that. In terms of the, I mean, I think the question around the £200,000, I think it was answered, I think, in the back of Jane's question, to be honest, unless Stephen's got anything else he wants to add to it. In terms of whether the Scottish Government are going to provide funding, I wish I knew the answer to. I mean, I think that the key thing is that they have provided that funding for flood prevention schemes in the past. There was £40 million there last year. Projects in Selkirk received funding, projects in Brecon received funding. We received £500,000, obviously, towards some of the damage that was done there. So that fund has certainly been in place in the past. There's been no announcements so far this year, disappointingly, that there will be a fund for the forthcoming year. But obviously there are a number of issues around flood prevention that kick in future years, and you know, and I would be bitterly disappointed, I have to say, if the Scottish Government didn't bring forward funding for future years. I think all the indications are that they're saying to us, draw up a scheme for the flood prevention scheme. Now, to do that and then in future years say, but actually there won't be any funds towards it, I think would be seriously disappointing, to say the least. Certainly when we met with Paul Wheelhouse, the Environment Minister, he was very supportive of the scheme, and he fully appreciated the damage that the flooding does. To be fair, we were standing in our wellies in the Whitesands in December with about 3 or 4 foot of water around us. So I think he very much appreciated the damage that the flooding actually does have in the Whitesands. So I think he understands the challenge we've got. But obviously the important thing is the Scottish Government need to come up with the money, and we'll keep putting as much pressure on as we possibly can to achieve that. I don't know if Stephen or if James want to add anything to that at all.
Just to come back to Councillor Carruthers on that particular bullet point, I think what we're saying there is we could have stopped the design and actually promoted a scheme with a less amount of detail. I think there's been awareness, particularly with this scheme, that it is a significant public realm scheme, and it's been addressed with you know, close work with ourselves and economic development in the charrette process, and a lot of public consultation that has kind of driven the design further forward. And I think even you know, members' comments in this committee about the level of detail to get an understanding that's required. We've spent quite a lot of time in terms of the working out the graphics and the views and how the scheme would look to try and communicate that to people. So that's where a lot of the additional work has taken place this year or through this year, so that we're in a position to not only the scheme we can take forward for the order, but there is more design and more information there that we can communicate that better to the public when they ask you know, important questions like, what does this do from my view from this point? You know, how does it change the outlook on the river?
Kinian?
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, happy with the answers that have been given, especially the last one in regards to what Stephen's saying. And I thought that was my kind of understanding. Just wanted to make it absolutely clear, but I still find it difficult. I think we have to invest the £200,000 at this point in which to see the final project, but thereafter, I mean, we've got reports further on. I just wonder if we've got the cart before the horse here. But I think in the short term, we'll have to make that, to put forward the best case, maybe that £200,000, but I still find it very difficult to think that or even believe that Scottish Government will come up with that level of funding when we've got the 24 identified PVAs in a different report to this, and I get the feeling the money will go towards them instead. Absolutely essential, and I think we'd like to pick up on that, if you could pick up on that, on the recommendations with regard to member involvement. I'd really like to see some kind of, before this comes back to committee, member involvement, and you touching that, Chairman.
I think the key point around the 200,000 additional funding is that the Scottish Government have made it clear we have to get the scheme up to a particular level, and obviously that will contribute significantly towards that. Okay, members, can we, sorry, Finlay, yeah.
Sorry, just a quick question. On page 32, we've got a road safety programme of 100,000 and a speed limit and traffic calming of 100,000. And putting that in perspective, we've got £500,000 spent in the core paths. It's something that comes up at community councils on a regular basis about traffic calming or road safety signs or whatever. And a lot of the arguments come back is, you know, there's budget pressures and there's only some schemes we can actually adopt. I wonder whether the 200,000 for road safety is actually enough to do all the work that the communities want to be seen done.
With all budgets, the answer will probably no to that, I suspect. Anything you want to add to that, Stephen?
I think, I mean, again, it's probably for members to take into account when we set, these are the kind of indicative baseline budgets, but when we look at the funding for 15, 16 and going forward, it's maybe something to keep in mind for the January or the March meeting, where we start to bring some of the detail of the programmes that we want to bring forward. My colleagues that look after core paths would tell me that the funding isn't enough to deal with all the issues that they have there in terms of releasing and freeing up or making improvements in accessibility and the benefits that has on the kind of the local economy and tourist-related issues. And certainly the service manager that looks after road safety and traffic would tell me that it's not enough either to take all the projects forward that he has in mind. But I think we're with the resources that we have available, we're looking at a spread across all the demands that have been made upon us. And certainly in capacity to deliver projects, if we move those figures around significantly, we need to take that into account in terms of the resources that we have in place for, say, the £500,000 in the core path network, if we were to change that or reduce it, and the resources that we have in place in the road safety and the traffic calming programmes. There isn't really an answer that says we can fund everything. It's more a balance of views and opinions around the table for this committee to come to a decision on.
I think when we obviously discussed this issue at Policy and Resources on the 18th of November, I think we'll see very clearly the challenge we've got in terms of the available capital budget and the demands on that budget. Okay, members, can we turn to the... Sorry, Brian, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the back of that, I want to ensure that these calming measures, the budget is used appropriately. And I've raised this on a number of occasions, and it's not because it's outside my front door. But there are traffic calming measures installed on the road at my front door, which is a cul-de-sac with 4 houses, 2 on either side of the road. How can that possibly be a wise spend in terms of the traffic calming measures? Not only does it seem to me a totally unreasonable measure to have taken in that location, but it presents problems, as we know, insofar as clearing roads and the narrowness of the roads and the access for emergency vehicles, be they ambulances, fire engines or whatever.
Certainly, just to come back, the current way that we approach these kind of schemes and the Service Manager Network strategy, I'm sure you'll agree, there's a lot of time invested in terms of the consultation where we maybe get requests coming forward for traffic calming measures to be implemented, maybe where there are concerns, or maybe where we're looking at running through the programme of providing the speed limits that we have already agreed at committee. There tends to be quite a lot of consultation through the Community Council with the detail and just how that will manifest itself on the ground, so that there is, there are views taken into account, whereas the potential to change traffic movements or to certainly, if maybe there are other routes that traffic might switch to, and certainly this consultation on the detail of the traffic calming measures themselves.
In actual fact, to the best of my knowledge, and I was on the Community Council at the time that these measures were taken, there was no discussion. And you can't, in all honesty, justify in 50 metres of road the need for a bump in the middle of them.
Because he's probably responsible for it at the time.
No, Chair, I was attending the Community Council as well, and I don't recall it ever being discussed at Community Council. I would only like to confirm what Brian's saying. I've seen this particular traffic calming, I've been up that road, and it's, to me, it's just plain daft.
And I mean, I've been up that street as well, and I did raise an eyebrow as well, but I don't think we're really in a position to look back at historic decisions. I think what's important is that decisions that we take, based particularly at a time of limited budgets, we have to get it right, and certainly the schemes that come forward at the moment certainly have consultation, indeed quite a lot of consultation. We had one at the State Area Committee last week, I think about the 3rd time. So I think there's a lot of consultation in the schemes that are coming forward at the moment, and ultimately it'll be up to this committee to decide what schemes we take forward, and if we don't like those schemes, then we just don't support them. It's as simple as that. Ronnie, do you want to come in?
It's just a quick one, Chair. Just on the fleet asset class capital programme, we're asking for another £720,000 over the next 3 years to replace vehicles sooner. What's the cost ratio benefit of this? If you're renewing vehicles quicker, obviously the ones that renew will be getting older sooner.
There's even some in that list that are older than your last car, Ronnie.
Listen, I'll have I've got £120 for that car.
You want to answer that, Stephen, or Harry? Is Harry?
No, we'll need to come back on that one then, if that's okay.
We'll speak to Harry and come back on that one. Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, I think we've reviewed 2.1 and 2.2. Are we happy to approve the additional funding to be sought from Policy and Resources for Whitesands, Ian?
Well, certainly, aye, sorry, Chairman, and okay, we're agreeing with point 2. I think we have to in regards to see if we can actually build a full case there, if there is actually a case, and to put forward the strongest case of Scottish Government, but I go back to the point of member involvement. Is this the appropriate place to put it in here, because it is subject to that actual recommendation that we look to agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful to put in here that we note that a report will be brought before the Steel Area Committee in December and to this committee in January around the Whitesands project, and also there'll be an opportunity for members to view the design work that's been done to date, and we'll obviously get officers to set aside a time for that to happen, and members get invited along to have a look at that as soon as possible. So we can add that in there. Okay, 2.4, we're happy to note. Happy to accept the grant funding. 2.5, I think it's fair to say we've reviewed all the information around 2.6. Happy to note 2.7 and 2.8. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, can we turn to item number 8, which is the action programme, effectively for the implementation of the local development plan. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Ian? And then Ian.
Thanks. Just looking through the action programme, there are an awful lot, and particularly looking at Stranraer, where you see the red boxes. In relation to various areas, it says that the developer landowner has been contacted and to provide update. That pervades the entire document in many respects. What exactly have we done there? Have we just contacted them all recently and we're waiting for their responses? Presumably, this would be done on an ongoing basis. I'd just be interested in an explanation of what exactly that means.
Chair, yeah, really that's just a reflection of the fact that this is the first time that we've prepared an action plan associated with our new local development plan, which was only adopted in September. So following on from the adoption, we've now been in touch with various landowners to get an update on their proposals for individual sites, which have been confirmed as allocated within the LDP. It really marks a bit of a sea change, if you like, in terms of the new planning system, because we're now expected to be much more proactive. I think in the past, once a plan was approved and adopted, that was it, and we then used it simply to determine planning applications. But now there's a much more proactive role for us in terms of trying to stay on top of where landowners are with their different sites and so on, because there is a clear expectation now within the planning system that sites that are allocated for development within the local development plan should be brought forward for development within the 5-year period. And one of the purposes of contacting landowners is to try to establish whether there are any barriers that are preventing those sites coming forward, and if there is anything that we as a planning authority can do to help assist to remove those barriers.
Thanks, Chair. So will we, as members, have sight of any of the responses on an ongoing basis?
Chair, what we intend to do is to bring forward regular updates to this document. So this isn't the only time that you'll see it for 5 years. We'll bring forward, probably rather than bringing it forward as and when we receive responses, we'll get into a cycle. Probably an annual or a biannual cycle of reporting this up to committee to give you an up-to-date position.
I'm going to bring Craig in just on the same point.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just on the same point, Chair. I mean, throughout the region, through the sites part of the action plan, there are a lot of sites marked on the red as in the danger. What effect can can or could this have on the delivery for the council on our LDP? And we're putting this up to Scottish Government as a draft action plan. And how do you think that Scottish Government might react to this when there are such a large number of possible constraints which will prevent the council taking the LDP forward as we've already agreed to?
Well, I think at this stage, the reasons for the existence of so many reds is basically down to timescale, because a number of the sites, because they've only just been allocated in the adopted plan, the owners haven't even yet put a planning application in for them, for example. So I think there will be a recognition that this is just simply a symptom of where we are in the process. We're so early in the process that you wouldn't really expect to see very much else.
Just come back on that, Steve. We're sending this up to Scottish Government for approval as a draft at this stage until it's all finalised. But how might they react to the fact that a lot of the sites possibly could be constrained for? So we are as a council, as we have them in our adopted LDP, and we might not be able to deliver this. I mean, what sort of effect or comments might Scottish Government have on that?
Chair, to be perfectly frank, it's difficult to say because this is the first time that we've done this. So we don't know what feedback we're going to get from government. This is a new requirement as part of the new planning system that we have to produce this action programme. Obviously, if we get feedback and comments from them, then we'll take that into account when we look at reviewing this, and we'll also take that into account when we review the plan. I think their focus is very much on ensuring that we have a 5-year marketable land supply, and that's what's been identified in the plan, and that's the purpose. That's one of the purposes of doing this level of detailed monitoring, is to say, well, where are we with that? Given that we're only a month into the life of the plan, I don't think they would expect to see very much evidence of progress. I think we'll start to worry if we get to year 3 and year 4, and there's a lot of reds in here, then that maybe starts to ask questions about, well, actually, are those sites effective? Are they ever going to be deliverable? And should we, in the review of the plan, actually be contemplating taking them out and putting sites in that we've got more confidence that could be delivered?
Okay, I've got Ian Crothers next, and then Finlay. Sorry, Jim, and then Finlay.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, I'm absolutely happy with the report as it stands. 2.4 is the only bit I'd like to get clarity on and what that means. I did see a local development plan, although there was a lot of hard work on that went into it, I did think there was a political deficit because the member officer working group and that didn't get set up in time, I didn't think, or re-engaged in time. 2.4 points to the fact that we should agree to receive a report back to the committee on the options for future member engagement in a local development plan as it progresses. What does that look like, Steve? What is it kind of? I think as a member, I'd like to certainly see that, see how it progresses. Councillor Peacock certainly picked up some points here. Again, we're at a starting point. I do see this as a blank canvas right now. We're only a month in, like you say. So, but certainly a year, 2 years down the line, you want to see this actually have an effect on the local economy, Dumfries and Galloway, and addressing a lot of the pressures that are on in regards to housing, business premises, so on and so forth. So, what does that actually look like in regards to member involvement?
Chair, again, to be frank, at the moment we don't know. I think there are probably different options there, and the intention would be to develop those into a paper that we would bring round the groups for discussion prior to bringing a report forward for this committee to consider. There would be a range of different options, everything from member officer working group to project board to subcommittee, and the purpose of the paper would be to set those options out for members to consider in the groups first off.
Absolutely happy with that, Chairman. If we get a chance that Steve or whoever comes round to discuss it with the political groups, so we can get our input into the actual report before it comes forward. Happy with that, Chairman.
Okay, I've got Jim next, then Finlay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I obviously realise the amount of work that went into the LDP, etc., etc. But to go on to my points touch on both what Councillor Dick and Councillor Carruthers have been coming up with. As regards the red sites deliverable in Stranraer, the vast majority of those sites were in the previous local plan and are considered by a lot of people in Stranraer as to be probably either very hard to deliver or undeliverable because of constraints. That then touches on the options for member involvement and review of the LDP. I realised that I became a councillor possibly after the first draft had been out and afterwards, but my impression of the consultation with members after that was we were listened to, but that was as far as it went. There were no deviations were made at all on a point that I personally brought up and were brought up. There were other points brought up by other members. The 3.6, they're talking about brief discussion of what the council expects to do in preparation for the next LDP. We were told on more than one occasion during the committee meetings regarding the LDP was we're going to have to start looking at this just about soon after it is actually implemented because we've only got 5 years before we need a new one. I'm actually surprised that there's no set time scales for the further stages because, as we've also been told on more than one occasion, current LDP has a great bearing on the planning performance of the council and its ability to raise planning charges. I'm just very surprised that there is not any set timescales for how we're going to go about this because it could eventually mean we're running late, the same as our last LDP was, and we could be, if you want to put it in another way, penalised by not being able to raise our planning charges.
Final point, to be fair, I think we did have a report on the timescales for reviewing the LDP. I can't remember the date of the committee meeting, but certainly there was a timescale on that. I'll bring Stephen.
Chair, there is reference in the development plan scheme to the requirement for us to have the replacement LDP in place by September 2019. So there is a target date already set. What we are not able to do at the moment, because we've only just completed the process with adopting the current plan, is actually to actually prepare a full project plan for how we're going to achieve that September 2019 deadline. The intention is that the next version of the development plan scheme that we bring, this is an annual document that we bring to committee every year, so the next version of the development plan scheme will have the fully detailed out project plan associated with it, because it's absolutely right what Councillor McClung's saying. We have to manage, we have to project manage this process very tightly to make sure that we never get ourselves into a position where we have an adopted plan that is more than 5 years old, because that would then start to count against our performance as a planning authority, and it's our performance as a planning authority in the future that ministers are going to be looking at very, very carefully in terms of deciding whether we are going to be allowed to charge higher planning fees.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just glad that I've got the reassurance that we are going to try and make sure as best we can that we can get it in for September 19, because as you say, if we don't, we're going to be up a gum tree, because the chances are you will not be able to charge the higher rates. I forgot to ask one little question. Page 85, when can we expect to see the house and land audit? It says it will be issued annually. When can we expect to see that?
There's consultations. It's really a technical exercise. So there's consultations with house builders and planning agents, and those have recently taken place. So it's a case of finalising the comments we've received back, and it's usually just published straight on the council website. So it will be within the next, probably early in the new year.
I take it members will get notified when it gets published on the website. I'm quite happy for it to be published there, but as long as members are actually aware that it's there.
Yes, we can do that. Thanks.
Okay, I've got Finlay and then Alistair and then Jane.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome the action programme. I think it'll be useful moving forward, and I appreciate that it's for it's relating to things that are already in the LDP. I just wonder where fracking lies within the local development plan, and whether that's something that's already been developed or something that should have been included in the action programme. Where does it actually lie within the LDP?
Well, the Chair, the adopted LDP contains policies on safeguarding mineral assets. It doesn't contain policies specifically on fracking as such, simply because during the period that the LDP was being developed, fracking wasn't a particular issue for us. Should it become more of an issue during the next few years, then that's something that will be factored into the review of the plan when we're looking at LDP2 and whether there is a need for any more specific guidance in relation to that topic. In the meantime, Scottish planning policy has been published just earlier this year, and that does contain some more specific guidance to authorities on fracking.
Okay, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. This day of all days, sir, the old song, there's a long, long trail of winding, but we've got there, and I think all credit to those at the end of the day who have got us there. Insofar as 2.4 is concerned, Chair, I would like to think that as we get the report and we develop the proposals in the report, that it will help to expedite the route down which we'll travel in the future. At the same time, of course, giving us as much member involvement and member input as possible. So, by and large, Chair, I'm well content with what we've got before us today. Just one minor point, sir, from the basis of clarification. 2.5, delegate authority to the head of planning and regulatory services. Now, you've heard me in this semantical theme before, Chair. I take it that means a remit with powers. I have no problems with giving Steve a remit with powers, but I think it's better to make it clear by saying it's a remit with powers.
We've had this before. What did we agree the last time we had this point before?
A remit with powers, sir.
Remit with powers, okay. That's fine. Don't have a problem with that. So we can remit with powers to Steve to make any technical or consequential modifications to the action programme. Okay, can I bring in Jane now?
Chairman, it's really about the review issue, and I feel the same way as other members did, that there was a problem with the way that the new LDP process worked for members. Members were left unable to change the LDP content unless a matter had been raised by the public. And that was, I think, round the wrong way for many of us. We really didn't feel we were involved if we were not either on the working group or part of a group that was on the working group or had membership of the then P&E committee. It was difficult to get involved. I would just like consideration to be given, Chairman. This is about physical planning, and I think we should sit as area committees and be given the opportunity to consider the LDP actually at area committee level. So I'm simply feeding that in as a suggestion to be considered.
That suggestion we're taking on board. I think there's a commitment from Steve to, obviously I think it's important this particular piece of work at 2.4 is very much member-led, so I think there's a commitment from Steve to come to all the groups, get our views on how we want to take this forward, and then obviously bring a report to the committee on member engagement. It's obviously an issue that members feel strongly about. Do we have any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, we obviously considered the comments at 2.1. We're happy to agree 2.2, agree 2.3, agree 2.4, and remit with powers 2.5. Okay, sorry, Ian.
So just when you come back to 2.1, I'm looking at it for reverse, but I made some comments in regards to 2.4, took some notes down in regards to member involvement. Should it have been picked up there, or is that was taken into consideration earlier on in the recommendations?
I mean, primarily an operational point, I suppose. I don't see any need to put it in there, but I think there's a clear commitment to come round the groups from Steve to discuss with members what that report will look like before that report's brought to the committee. So we'll have an opportunity for members to feed in at that point. It's important. Who's got a note of that? Turn to item number 9, still on the local development plan. This time we're being asked to obviously update and adopt various pieces of supplementary guidance. Can I ask Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
There's nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Ronnie Ogilvie.
Chair, I think this is very, very good. All these supplementary guidances with the pictorial evidence and that, you couldn't make it any clearer. And it's boring, but I enjoyed that part of it because I thought it's clear what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And to me, it cuts out the any confusion that may arise with these supplementary guidances. And I've got to say, well done to whoever come up with this because it's excellent. I think the pictorial evidence is good. And so I just think it was an excellent document, that part. The other bit's a bit boring for me, but anyway.
Handy the next time you're converting a traditional agricultural property, Ronnie, you'll know exactly where you stand. Okay. Other members? Ian and then Jim.
It's just, I think, I'm trying to look through, get my, but I think we're agreeing for this to go out to consultation. It just in how can it possibly shaped at this point? It's well on. I agree with most of it there, but again, this will go back to interpretation as it comes forward in policy. It is quite clear, it's quite obvious, it's quite clear cut when you look at it, but I've already had some people come towards me who have been waiting on this in regards to small building groups who think that it doesn't align, it could well be interpreted completely differently from what the original council decision was. So what's in regards to this, so in regards to all these that are going out of consultation, how do we get involved again? Do we just turn up public meetings, or how do we, what's the kind of protocols for that, Chairman?
I mean, there's obviously two parts to the report. There's those that are going out to consultation. So, for example, at 2.1, that guidance is going out to consultation, but there are also a number of others that have gone out to consultation. For example, the Whitesands Master Plan, that what we're being asked to do today is to agree those and any amendments as a result of the actual consultation itself. So our involvement, if you like, is to look at the public response to the consultations, make any amendments we wish to do, and then adopt these. So there's two parts to it. There are some that have already been out to consultation, and obviously they've been subject to reports to this committee before, but there's obviously others that are being recommended today to go out to consultation. So our involvement is very much looking at the ones before us today, looking at the public comments and determining whether or not we actually adopt these as supplementary guidance.
Chairman, I mean, it's 2.1 in particular. I was looking at the three that are going out, so I can pick that up later.
Okay, I've got Jim and then Jane, and then I think Alistair, did you want to answer?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The housing in the countryside, it's not really so much a question, rather I scratched my head. In page 186, Balmash is shown in the mid-Galloway HMA, while Auchenmagh Bridge and Stairhaven, which are all further from Stranraer than Balmash is shown in the Stranraer HMA. Can somebody explain why Balmash, that's next to, it's about 2 miles from Glenluce up the New Luce Road, is actually in the Galloway HMA? The mid-Galloway HMA and not the Stranraer one?
Chair, we're just checking the details of that. One of the issues is we're trying to relate the previously agreed small building groups to the new housing market areas. We're trying to transpose those onto like a new geography that was set out in the local housing strategy. So it may be that there are one or two that are not quite correct. So we'll certainly make sure that we double check that these individual small building groups relate to the correct housing market area.
Yeah, I can certainly say, as I say, the Stairhaven ones and the Auchenmag ones are in the Stranraer area. I believe so is Glenluce. So it just seems rather strange why number 1, which is a Balmesh, actually comes up under the Mid-Galloway one. I think that should be in the Stranraer one.
Okay, we will double check
Check
them.
that, yeah. Okay. Okay, I've got Jane next.
Yes, I think these are works of art. I think these are really very helpful, and I agree with members that they should give clear guidance. I'm just curious about page 210, about the example given on 210 at the top. With a tick saying better development. There are 2 examples of the conversion, and the one on the left-hand side seems to have an extraordinary kind of lean-to arrangement, not in proportion with the previous building. And I would say, if I saw those, that particular example, I would think that was not a great example of a steading conversion. I mean, it doesn't seem to conform with the proportions of the building, and I'm just curious that we're putting that out as a good example. I would ask whether or not we might have made a mistake there. It looks like a very large lean-to with a rather confusing roof pattern, and I am curious as to why that is considered to be a good or better development.
Which one are you referring to? Which diagram of the one?
Page 210.
All right, yeah.
There are the top.
Yeah.
The top diagram. There are 3
Yeah.
little buildings proposed, and the one more on the left-hand side has what looks like a kind of large lean-to, kind of almost like a cat slide arrangement coming down from the roof. It just, to my mind, would not be what we might expect to see. I'm just curious to have some explanation.
I bring Stephen at this point.
Chair, I think this is probably, and I take on board the positive comments that have been made about moving towards, expressing these things a lot more in pictures and drawings, rather than always trying to do it in words. And that's certainly been the intention with a lot of these documents, is to move much more towards this sort of visual representation. This is one where I suspect that the drawing doesn't particularly do it justice. And I think what we've tried to show here is that that form of extension is at least preserving the kind of long traditional plan form of the steading building, whilst allowing a modest amount of extension, using potentially traditional style of, as you said, a cat slide roof, albeit with a much more modern approach to the front glazing. But I'll take on board the point, and we'll have another look at that drawing, because we certainly don't want to mislead. That's not the intention here at all. It's really meant to be read in conjunction with the other diagram about where it all goes wrong, and saying probably that's a better approach than the large glass conservatory that's shown as a contrast.
Prime example of when your words were better than the diagram, Steve, I think. So we may wish to. I did wonder where the section in the bottom left-hand corner was just examples of best practice for Wigton Planning Committee of past, but I wasn't going to comment on that. But I think Steve's going to come out and have a look at that drawing on that particular page. Alistair, next, I think.
Thanks, Chair. And let me point out to Councillor Maitland the glorious day that Councillor Foster and I were the only 2 members that turned up to the working group and talking about issues pertaining to the Stewardship District in particular. That's why the proposals that are going forward are so well balanced and well rounded. Would that not be right, Graham? But anyway, going back, sir, to the strategic nature of the document, which really is what we're here for today to consider. Can I suggest, in relation to 2.1 and 2.2, Chair, that this is an issue which manifestly will affect all 47 members. And when it comes back, Chair, I wonder perhaps maybe if we should hold a seminar and then have the committee reconvening, this committee reconvening to take the decisions immediately in the back of the seminar, Chair. Because I think that way you would give all members who are not, in fact, on this committee a legitimate voice and a legitimate input via the seminar, and it would be fresh in our minds, Chair, as I say, when the committee come to take the decisions in relation to the consultative responses that we receive. I offer it as a suggestion, and again, sir, pleading the virtues of consistency, can I suggest, in fact, 2.7, we change that again from delegating authority to remitting with powers to Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
Are you suggesting that the seminar is carried out in conjunction with these going out to public consultation? We're not going to hold up the public consultation to have a seminar, just carry it in conjunction.
No, my apologies, Chair. I'm not making myself clear. It's when we come back, as it were, to 2.2 to receive the report back to this committee. I would like to think, Chair, that on the morning of the committee, we hold the seminar. All 47 members are given the opportunity to comment and to input and express views on the report, and then we as a committee convene thereafter, and we reach the formal decisions, which the seminar obviously can't do, sir. As I say, that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, I think that's an eminently sensible suggestion. Unless we've got 47 items on the January EEI committee meeting, I'm sure that's something we can certainly take forward. I've got Finlay next.
Just a simple omission on page 188. There's, as far as I can see, there's over 45 house and market areas in Stuartley, but there's actually only 35 detailed in the index.
Do you mean building groups? Sorry.
Yes, by the building groups.
I think, just for members' information, there was an email sent on Friday afternoon by Tracy, which had the correct number on it.
Members should have a paper copy of that. It was emailed around, yeah? Yeah, okay. Okay, do we have any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, members happy to agree 2.1 and 2.2, and are members happy on the morning of the committee meeting to have a seminar which all members are invited to look at the feedback before we consider this? Yeah, okay, so we're happy to agree that as an addition to 2.2. In terms of 2.3, happy to agree that. And the master plan for Noble Hill and Brownrigg Loaning, happy to agree 2.4. And Stranraer Waterfront, etc., 2.5. Okay, the Whitesands master plan consultation, 2.6. Yeah. Okay, 2.7, we're happy to remit with powers. And happy to adopt the Whitesands master plan as supplementary guidance 2.8. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Can we turn now to item number 10? Okay, members, we obviously considered this in September and subsequently it went to area committee. So obviously members will have an opportunity area committee to put forward specific views around specific local issues. So I don't intend to give members opportunity to rehearse what we've already said. All those comments are contained within the report. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members? Obviously, my warning not to repeat things at area committee has worked well. Sorry, Alistair.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, sir, I didn't quite catch where we are on item 10.
Sorry.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, sorry, I've jumped one there. Sorry, my apologies. I've missed a paper out. Sorry. That's one way to deal with item number 10. Just avoid it and you'll not remember. Sorry. We'll go back to item number 10, which is the report around planning controls, PD lending and betting offices. My apologies. It's the same officer, so it won't change. Okay, can I ask Alistair if he wishes to add anything to the actual report rather than the one that I've just given him?
There's nothing to add, Chair, and my apologies for missing that.
Okay. Okay. Open it up to members' questions on paper number 10. Alistair.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Sir, Mr Sutty makes a compelling case as to why, in fact, it's not appropriate to address this issue by dealing with proposed changes to planning legislation. Interestingly enough, Chair, no later than this morning, listened on the radio coming along the road that the FCA at long last are flexing their muscles and really sort of putting down further markers, to rein in the worst excesses and the worst practices of this form of activity, payday lending. So to that extent, it reinforces, I think, the points that are made in the report, and I'm well content, with these being submitted as our response.
I would agree with you 100% on that. Ian?
Can we just get, have we got an update in regards to that, which I had it as well on the news this morning in regards to payday lenders, how the maximum they can charge on interest now, and is that UK-wide? That's the only bit they didn't mention. I take it it's UK legislation, it covers everywhere, but just if we've got any clarification on it, if we have an update, please.
Chair, yes. Fortunately, I heard the same news item this morning, that it is a UK-wide regulatory regime that applies to payday lenders, which is why the Scottish Government have decided to take this route in terms of making adjustments to, proposed adjustments to planning controls, which is the only element of this which is delegated. The regime, the regulatory regime is now going through a process of public consultation. So there are a number of options which are going out to consultation with the public and with the industry. But certainly the reports that were broadcast this morning indicated that this is kind of the beginning of the end for the mass payday lenders market. So the issue that the change in planning powers is proposed to address, i.e. this anticipated proliferation and spread of payday lenders in our high streets, is actually probably most unlikely to materialise because of these proposals to really clamp down through the regulatory regime.
Yeah, Chairman, just on again, when you reflect on what Steve's saying, it does make you think, will this drive the average Joe public who's desperate in money to a kind of illegal money lender? And you wonder if the community customer services should be picking up on that and should we be referring that to them. This might put a pressure on them. We need to be aware of it, but certainly, just my initial thoughts, Chairman.
Certainly a point that was raised at the discussion we had on the poverty strategy, and it's certainly an issue. But I think as members are very clear that the way to deal with this is to have appropriate controls on the actual companies themselves. In my view, frankly, that means caps on interest rates, as well as the cap that's being proposed around the amount that can actually be lent. And I don't think planning policy is really the way to deal with this appalling problem, to be honest. Okay. Any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, happy to note 2.1 and happy to agree the response. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay. For the second time, can we turn to item number 11? I won't repeat what I said before, and I'm sure the Director has nothing to add, so I'll open it up to members. Finlay?
Thanks, Chair. We've been asked to agree to the shortlist of 23 PVAs, but we're aware that there's currently a investigation into the flooding in Carsfairn last January. Is it appropriate for Carsfairn to be added into this? And if they're not, is there any consequences in terms of work that the Council might do to alleviate any flooding in the future?
I think sort of PVAs are kind of out with our control, but I'll hand it over to officers to answer.
Right, Chair, thank you. Yes, we've been doing some works for cars fair, and we've actually got a flood risk assessment being done, and it's my team's going to the community council this Monday night to discuss this on initial findings. As for putting it or designating it as a potential vulnerable area, as things stand, does it meet the thresholds set by SEPA? So, you know, to sort of answer your question, it won't be done as a PVA, but it's certainly someone that's getting out.
Okay, any other members? Sorry. Alistair and then Jim.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. This is obviously an issue which is becoming increasingly of concern, for instance, in the mid-Galloway context, and particularly, but not exclusively, Chair, in relation to the town of Newton Stewart. As already indicated, there are coastal flooding issues in the villages of Gallaston and Isle of Whithorn, but I think the main issue at the moment, in fact, is in relation to the Cree Valley and Newton Stewart. Now, we did set up a flood action group some time ago. It has travelled quite a distance, Chair, in my view at least, and I would pay tribute to the support that we've had in doing so from Mr Speedy and James MacLeod and his staff. That is much appreciated. But the question I would like to pose, Chair, is that bearing in mind we almost had another flooding just, I think it was last Thursday, where, do we go or where are we going from here? I do appreciate, Chair, that there's been a certain amount of comparatively minor works have been carried out. We've got the pod which has been delivered, if my understanding is correct, which is a big step forward in terms of reassurance. But there are still, it would appear, Chair, further issues which need to be addressed. And again, as I say, without sort of trying to queue jump or anything like that, it would be helpful to know in advance of the next meeting of the flood action groups or just exactly what the scenario for going forward is likely to be involving the council. So I'd be grateful for a response from that, Chair, on that, Chair.
Yes, again, we've had a flood risk assessment done for Newton Stewart, and it's highlighted a number of measures, and we did put in a bid for capital funding, which got knocked back. So I think it's the intention to try and get sort of capital funding to look at these measures. As for the flood trailer, I'm told that it's getting sort of graphics on it this week, so hopefully it should be taken to Newton Stewart very soon. So again, that will be used, in times that it needs to be used with floodgates, etc.
Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. Can I say, first of all, in relation to the graphics, I wouldn't be too precious about not having the graphics on it. Standing what nearly happened last week, the quicker we can get it relocated and or get it located, not relocated, in that part of the region, I think the greater the assurance it would be for the communities in question. The other issue, as I say, I'm grateful for the honesty of the response. So the moral of the story then is that, we're just going to have to try and argue our case even harder at other decision-making forums. That's helpful to know, sir. Thank you.
And there's a queue, as you know. There's a queue not only in our decision-making forums, but of course, importantly, there's a queue when it comes to Scottish Government funding, because like all the other major projects, these are based around 80% funding, or maybe not the full amount for Newton Stewart, but certainly a large contribution from the Scottish Government. Yeah, you're right, there's a queue. Okay, we have Jim and then George.
If I can just bear your indulgence regarding your warning, regarding comment made at Wigton Area Committee regarding A716 to Dromore, and it should be included along with Port William. The officer's response was areas out with PVAs can be considered, but many of the issues suffered at Port William were of coastal erosion rather than flooding. Doesn't address the A716 and Dromore, and considering some of the other PVAs that are mentioned in the report mention direct coastal defences. Now, we've just discussed not that long ago that it's going to be between 750,000 and £1 million to fix the A716 and get the coastal defences back up to make sure that road stays where it should be, rather than in the middle of the bay.
James.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point we're making with the difference between coastal defences and flood protection, and also the stage that we're at with the consideration of options. I mean, any coastal location that coastal defences are an option has appeared in this short list of measures. That short list of measures is still subject to consideration as to whether there's as I discussed earlier, a positive cost benefit to these measures. In terms of the works on the bit unclear, the reference, if you could just explain further, reference to the coastal damages to the road in reference to this piece of legislation.
The area committee, there was mention made of Stranraer and the coastal, the road being eroded by the water coming in from. I brought up the A716 as a perfect example of another road that was in danger of disappearing into the middle of the bay. As was discussed earlier, the last big storm ended December 13 and January 14 resulted in part of the roadway actually disappearing. So I struggle to see why the 716 and Ramoa are not on when you're talking about in some of the PVAs that are here. You're talking about direct defences for coastal flooding. Now that was exactly what happened in the 716 was coastal flooding because of high tide and exceptional wind.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of coastal flooding, we're not going to stop coastal flooding of roads that are below the highest sea levels. These roads will continue to flood. We may, and in this case, we will be undertaking works to prevent scour of that road, and a number of works have been undertaken along that section of road, and that will continue to do so over the next 2 years, as Stephen advised in response to a previous query. Direct defences generally look at property protection, which is where we will be targeting resources in terms of flood defences. The PVAs has been identified, are identified around a couple of main criteria in terms of numbers of properties at risk and the potential or the presence of a flood protection scheme, which is why some of these areas are identified as potentially vulnerable. And as Brian's already commented with regard to Carsfen, the fact that an area is out with a PVA doesn't prevent the local authority from looking at measures that would manage flood risk within that, although clearly with a demand on resources likely to outstrip the resources, we want to target the areas where the benefit is greatest for the spend that's made available.
Okay, I have George next and then Ian Covers.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually an issue which is more maybe roads, actually. It's the ongoing situation at Parton Mill where, you know, at the side of Loch Ken, where it seems to get flooded every year and the A713's then closed, which results in a big problem for through transport coming down from Ayrshire. It results in problems for timber transport and results in problems for milk transport coming down into Stewartry. Last year at the big flood at New Year, I mean, I think we've got to remember that most of the water which came down was gathered up in the upper Nithsdale and upper Stewartry areas of the region. And it's got two options. It either comes down the Kendee Valley or comes down the Nith Valley. So I think we have to remember when the sands get flooded, we can also have big floods at the same time on the side of Loch Ken. And I'm just wondering if there's anything planned at all for that road, or has it been totally put in the back burner?
I think we had looked at works there previously at Parton Mill to raise the road slightly. That works has not been carried out. There has been some resurfacing works. I think the challenge is that the height that the road would need to be raised to achieve a level out with the sort of predicted flood levels is significant. I don't think I would be seeing this as necessarily under the flood risk management, that process. It would be something that we would do through the infrastructure, but maybe a combination of both. I can't give you a specific answer as to whether that will happen at this immediate time.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. It's in regards to, I suppose if we try to get this into context, James or Brian, whoever's got to answer this. I'm looking at page 330, and you've got the boxes there. You've got second and third from the bottom. In fact, the last two at the bottom. SWMP, I take it that Surface Water Management Plan. It says, will be done for Annan. The council has no duty to upsize capacity within the drainage system, but the Surface Water Management Plan will look at the design for exceedance. So we'll look at the design at something potentially that will take into consideration extra capacity. At least I'll look at that. And confirmation of the waterback will be considered in regards to that. That which is the next bullet point. And it just, and the next bullet point after that, which was a request that plans should be developed with consideration to plans for routine maintenance such as gully cleaning and in consultation with key partners such as Scottish Water. It goes on to say that from an officer's point of view that DG first undertake the gully clearing and follow a maintenance schedule. We're all aware of that. So it's in real terms, the points that are brought up in the area committee, how does that affect what actually happens? Because we've got an appendix 1, and that's looking at the local flood risk management plan. That's how it'll be adhered to. There's 3 relevant points I thought were brought up, certainly in Andy and Esther. That 3 I'm picking on, they were all relevant. But how do we go forward? How does that affect the issues that are raised? The top one, the flash flood in Annan, that was a lot of that was to do with the actual gullies being too high, the settlement of the road, and water wasn't actually getting into the surface water system in the first place. There was issues like that were coming up. So how does that? I don't think we can just ignore, because I don't see it reflected in Appendix 1 in the local flood risk management plan. What's been pointed out in certainly Appendix 2 in regards to Annandale and Esther, in particular Annan here, going up through into Waterbeck. So it's no point in just talking about it, recognising there is a problem. It certainly was a major problem in Annan a couple of years ago when the whole Fish Cross and Charles Street down through there got flooded. So how do we actually address this problem through a reporting mechanism like this?
So the responses from officers are contained in Appendix 2 to each of the points, but I don't know if you want to add anything to response to Ian.
Yeah, I think we've got to sort of realise that local flood risk management plans are sort of a strategic tool, and it's got to be sort of region sort of wide and based first of all. But as the report says, we'll be looking at Annan for a surface water management plan, which but again, if it's drainage which lacks capacity, it's not that we can solely go in there and upsize it all. So these plans will look, if these drains don't cope, how do you take these flows from going in doors, shops. So it all will get looked at. We're working closely with Scottish Water and other parties there. So again, that will look at that. Hopefully that there'll be a plan in place which will help. But in times as last week, if your rainfall's that intense, there's no drainage systems going to cope. So it's try to make sure that you can try and stop it going into properties. That point, Waterbeck, we took your point on from that last meeting that we had, and it's something that will get looked at, but because it is within a PV zone, so it's something that will get looked at as part of the plan. I think you had the third point. Again, when it comes to gully clearing, that DG first have got their role to play, but even if these are cleared, it doesn't mean to say that flood won't stop, which is probably covering the first point. Okay.
Thanks for that, Chairman. I take on board exactly what Brian's saying there in regards to that, but I would just like to think that this would influence either the capital programme or the maintenance programme in which DG first delivers its service, and it just to think, kind of like to think we could tie a thread in there somewhere, because this has been recognised strategically at kind of committee level of the council, so these should have an effect on the work programmes, whether it's maintenance or whether it's capital.
Okay, do you have any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, we're happy to note the views of area committees at 2.1. Agree the measures at 2.2. Note 2.3. And to note 2.4. Okay, Ian, yep.
Just being looking up there, Chairman, I think it would have been appropriate at 2.1 if we could put some kind of wording in there that would reflect the comments made, and that's in regards to the area committees, not just Andy and Esther, but all the area committees that have consulted, how they would affect or influence the capital programmes or the actual maintenance programmes for DG First as it goes forward, and probably at some point next year, this whole committee.
Certainly be up to this committee to determine what the capital programmes are and what the commissions are in terms of any revenue expenditure. So this will certainly come back to this committee, and it'll be up to this committee to determine that. And likewise, it's up to members when they bring forward their budget proposals, how they wish to allocate any capital.
I think I see, I mean, you look at it as very strategic, very broad, which I can understand, but I'm thinking more area committees have identified particular places of weakness, and they could be prioritised to the officers, certainly. And I'd like to think there was a thread there that certainly put them forward in some kind of forward plan into the programme of works that would actually be presented to the P&E, to the environment, economy, environment, infrastructure, or whatever that type of committee can after next April, whatever that looks like. I think that should, if the area committee is making clear points here, they should be prioritised to the officers, then put forward in some kind of recommendation to how that work's then programmed in.
Okay, take on board your point. Obviously, this is all subject to public consultation as well, of course, so the public may have particular views to add to the ones that the area committee have obviously indicated so far. So let's obviously see what the public consultation between now and June 2015 actually brings in terms of proposals. Okay, can we turn now to item number 12? Okay, members were obviously very clear in September 2013 that you wish to see a report detailing exactly where any parking that would be lost through the Whitesands Flood Protection Scheme would be replaced. I think members were clear that you wouldn't support the scheme unless we were confident that alternative parking provision within close proximity of the Whitesands was actually found, and I think this report sets out where officers are proposing the additional car parking. Could I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up now to members? Okay, Ian.
I suppose just a kind of question to kind of get the ball rolling. 2.5, just clarity on what that means. 3.30 to 3.32 is agreed to negotiations being undertaken with regard to the potential additional off-street car parking indicated at these paragraphs, and if required, bidding funded made through the capital investment programme. Just absolute clarity. I was trying to get clarity in regards to that. If you, that on there, but I do think looking at the whole report as I was looking through it, I felt as if it was a wee bit the cart before the horse. We're looking at a wider strategic programme of works, taking into consideration the Whitesands as if it's coming forward as an agreed project that will take place. When we've already discussed earlier, I suppose we'll discuss further at this point, that it's not an agreed project because of the funding and the lack of funding and the potential of the real risk there to the funding not even coming forward. So I don't say we're totally against the project in principle, but we have to look at kind of what, in real terms, it's what it leads to. I've probably got more concerns in regards to what we're moving towards in the exempt item. I'll not get into the detail of that here, certainly, but I've got real concerns there, and just clarity in regards to 2.5.
I think in terms of the project itself, this is a report that has to go hand in hand with the Whitesands project. So, for example, we're not going to add additional car parks to the ones that the council currently own unless this project goes ahead. You know, that's what this is about, replacement parking. So by definition, unless the parking's lost, then we don't need to replace it. So I think it's very clear that the council won't be putting any expenditure or significant expenditure unless we're actually going ahead with the Whitesands project itself. It's obviously subject to significant Scottish Government funding, so unless we secure that funding, the project won't go forward. I think there are particular parts of the proposals here today, though, that should go forward irrespective of whether the Whitesands project's taken forward. I think the one in particular around the issue of off-street car parking. Now, there are a significant number of WL lines in Dumfries, in fact 75 car parking spaces worth, which could be removed very easily at very limited cost, and that would provide additional car parking in the town, and that can go ahead irrespective of whether the Whitesands flood protection scheme goes forward, because frankly we should be in favour of increasing car parking in the town. Businesses have to compete with out-of-town developments, they've got to compete with online shopping. We should be doing everything in our power to increase car parking in Dumfries. So I think that type of project could go ahead without us knowing effectively whether the Whitesands project itself will go forward. But in terms of purchasing other car parks, for example, then clearly we can't do that unless we secure the funding from the Scottish Government and we take forward the Whitesands flood protection scheme. So I don't think it's a case of the cart before the horse at all. I think it's a case of setting out very clearly where we would find alternative car parking should the Whitesands project actually go forward. Okay, other members? Okay, sorry, Ian, Dick, and then Ronnie, and then John.
Thanks, Chair. Have we any idea of what the cost implications are likely to be and how it's going to fit in with government's criteria for funding?
Ask John to answer that. Obviously, there's a number of projects there. The cost of one in particular obviously won't be considered until the exempt item. But there's a number of projects here. John, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. As you've indicated there, the potential changes to on-street would be relatively low cost. We've indicated in the report what that would comprise, but it's promotion of traffic regulation orders, changes to road markings, provision of additional signs, and obviously the associated staff time. Similarly, we've recommended or suggested some changes to off-street car parking, which are relatively minor changes. Some of them are just by remarking car parks in a different way from how they're marked at the moment. We've tried to make sure that we've not counted spaces where drivers are parking at the moment, but where they're not parking in marked out spaces. What I've tried to indicate is where these are new additional spaces, if you'll pardon the complication of that expression. As you move to other sites, obviously the potential costs increase and also the time scale, and similarly with regard to potential purchase of sites that we don't own at the moment. And again, potentially that comes back to an earlier point about having discussions with landowners prior to seeking funding for that work.
Thanks. So have we got any idea of the overall cost of everything, even a ballpark figure? And again, if I could just ask how this is likely to fit in with the government criteria for funding of the overall Whitesands project.
Yeah, this was primarily a desktop exercise, so we haven't got as far as the costing of how these changes could be brought into effect. I would envisage that the on-street works, the off-street works within our current council car parks, as indicated in the recommendation, could be achieved within the current or future capital allocations. Once you get into purchasing additional sites, obviously that expenditure increases significantly. And as you indicate, there's an exempt item to discuss a site which potentially will give you quite a big increase in off-street parking.
Sorry, Stephen, do you want to come in? Sorry.
If I just could come in, I've had sight of the report going to Policy and Resources Committee next week, and that will include, just following on from our capital report, it will include the baseline information that we discussed this morning for the infrastructure asset class. What it will also include is a refreshed Whitesands bid document, and that's getting fed into the capital investment strategy as well, as I understand it. And it will reflect the discussions and decision that was made this morning on the funding this year. What it will also reflect is, in relation to the exempt report, a cost in there to cover what is seen as possibly being something that is quite readily deliverable with member agreement in terms of parking provision. What it doesn't include, as John's saying, is the kind of the minor works, probably the kind of the lower cost wins that we could achieve in parking, which we would seek to accommodate within the capital investment budget that we would be looking to agree in March next year, moving forward out of the £9 million baseline budget. What it also doesn't include is maybe something that we haven't really got our heads around in terms of quantifying is the additional further off-street parking and the negotiations that would be involved in that would be required just to come up with an understanding of how that scheme cost could be accommodated within the total works cost, as the Chair says, on the basis contingent that the scheme is actually moving forward. In terms of the funding, it's an area for negotiation with Scottish Government. I think in early discussions we've been quite pleased that a lot of the scheme, as well as saying it as a kind of public realm scheme as well as a flood protection scheme, they did say that a lot of the scheme and the works we're proposing would be eligible. I think car parks remote might be more of an issue for them. It's certainly something that we would need to take forward with them in negotiation in relation to any sort of co-finance.
Stephen? We've got Ronnie and then John and then Jane.
I know the exempt item's coming up later, which will deal with the off-street parking provision, additional off-street parking provision. But when we're looking at that, when you looked at that, I noticed there's 65 parking spaces, plus the 55 that's potentially already there. But these 55 might move on. But apart from that, if we looked at 2 stories car parking, and if we have, what's the outcome of that? What's your opinion on it?
Yes, we have considered double deck parking, and that's at, trying to find the reference to that, paragraph 3.33 in the report, where we looked at potential double deck provision at the D&G home site and also at various variations within the Whitesands car park. Obviously what you lose is some spaces on the ground level to give you space to provide the ramps up into the second level. You can buy or you can rent these essentially prefabricated units and build up a level. But what we found was that the cost per space that you actually provide when you take out the ones that you lose on the ground floor is a very expensive cost per space in terms of the provision. And given that fortuitously perhaps that through the other works we've identified essentially a like-for-like replacement, we didn't think that there was a benefit to that. I certainly don't think we would recommend providing an additional second level at the 2 sites we've mentioned in comparison with for example, providing additional spaces on street. The on street can be provided at relatively negligible cost. You can talk in pounds per space provided. That's maybe going to be a few £100. The cost for the additional level certainly was into the thousands, and I don't have the figures with me, but I think it was certainly something of the order of £5,000 per space. And if you're looking at also the D&G homes, that's in addition to the actual purchase price of that site. So it makes every parking space a very expensive commodity. And I think what we've also flagged up in the report is the recent changes that we've had within the parking stock, and you can have this incremental loss of parking numbers that we've had. So we'll have another situation in the town where we've been asked to look at something, and we're really focusing on that. We were trying to ensure that we wouldn't lose any more spaces from the stock that we already have.
Yeah, I did see that part in the report. And I understand it's 230 spaces we're creating and losing 233 because of that. But and I agree entirely that the on-street parking should be utilised more in a better way. The cost that you're implying here is for a structural built 2-storey car park. And what I was more looking at was really having other places like hydraulic systems, car park which don't need that kind of infrastructure in there. So it was just a thought that passed my mind about that, whether that's an option or not.
Certainly the option that we looked at was just this, and it was just one additional storey on top of the ground level, so you'd have ground and first floor. We didn't look at any other options, but I think anything that you get into that is not only the capital cost of providing it, but the ongoing revenue cost of maintaining that into the future.
Okay, John.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to do with doing away with the yellow lines and the on-street parking. I would take it most of these will be short stay, 2 hours limit, like most of the on-street parking in Dumfries at the moment. We've got a major problem in Dumfries at the moment. I don't know what's to do with this. Is since Police Scotland more or less done away with the traffic wardens, there doesn't seem to be anyone checking to see how long people are stopped there for. And we have a major problem. You're getting cars parked in off-street parking all day because there's no one to do any enforcement at present of the on-street parking. I know we've got inspectors for the council-owned car parks, but as I say, they've got other duties to do as well. And I'm also finding out some of the short-stay car parks are more or less being used as long-stay car parks because there's not really a great lot of enforcement in these things. And the major one is the on-street parking. As I say, there doesn't seem to be any enforcement since we've done away with the wardens because the police will only do it if it's causing an obstruction.
Yeah, you're correct that the vast majority of on-street spaces within Dumfries Town Centre are limited to 2 hour waiting. The exercise we've undertaken has identified some locations where there's on-street which is unrestricted. I'm not quite sure the basis of that. We'll have to consider that further, but the presumption would be that the majority of these would be short stay spaces. As you're correct that have an awkward situation with regard to enforcement. The reality is it's still a policing responsibility. Whether we can perhaps make that a higher priority within the police. There is also the national consideration of what's called DPE, decriminalised parking enforcement, and there was a meeting last week where they seem to have moved this forward a little bit, and what they seem to be looking at is a recommendation where they're suggesting that the authorities that don't have DPE at the moment get together and could potentially introduce this, and you've then got the economies of scale with the back office being perhaps provided by one of the authorities that already has DPE, rather than each of the, perhaps ourselves setting up our own arrangements. The potentially economies of scale, but that's when we get that further information, we would intend to bring future reports to this committee for its consideration.
I think it's a valid point John makes. I mean, we hear the Scottish Government talking about town centre first, but at the same time, we have a Police Scotland who don't regard parking enforcement on streets in town centres being important. There's a contradiction there in terms of national policy, and we need to have the enforcement on the streets, or you just have a situation which you have at the moment where some of the double yellow lines, people park on them anyway and haven't even created the parking spaces yet. So, I mean, there is a major issue around enforcement, I have to say, since the removal of the traffic wardens. I've got Jane next.
Well, I'm quite interested in paragraph 3.36, which is suggesting, in fact, that considering the surveyed area as a whole, there is spare capacity to cater for the surveyed demand. And there's been a reduction in parking demand, both on and off street, since the previous parking surveys undertaken in 2005. So, I mean, do we have a problem or don't we? I haven't actually had anybody complain to me about how difficult it is to park in Dumfries, interestingly. Councillor Martin suggests that there is a problem, and he's a local member, so I don't know. I'm talking about people coming in from outside Dumfries and trying to park. I don't know. Is there likely to be? Do we know what the trend's going to be? Is there going to be less demand for parking? Do we know that? Have we got any information as to what the situation is, or why that seems to have been in the last decade a lessening in demand? Because that's we're being told here. I could rather naughtily suggest that if people really think there is a problem, you just need to organise a system of asking people to pay, and then you could fund it.
You could suggest that, and you know what my answer will be. I mean, I think we have to be very clear that what we're saying here is actually, this is not just about the overall number of parking spaces in Dumfries. This is about actually supporting the businesses in the Whitesands. So It's no consolation telling the business in the Whitesands, don't you worry about it. There's a car parking space the other side of the river, which is about a 20-minute walk away. You know, so the overall car park numbers is not the only consideration we've got here. It's about, and I think members were very clear in September, it was about compensating the businesses in close proximity to the Whitesands for any loss of car parking as a result of the loss of spaces along the Whitesands. I think that's important because, frankly, people will park and then go to the nearest shop. They won't necessarily walk the other side of the town to support a business in the Whitesands. So I think we're very clear it was about providing support to the business in the Whitesands. We've got to take into account that businesses now have to not only compete with online shopping, but they've got to compete with out-of-town developments where you can literally park your car right next to the front door of the shop. And simply saying to people, don't worry, there's plenty of parking spaces, you just have to walk an extra 20 minutes, is not good enough as far as I'm concerned. I think John makes a point about there is a parking issue. I'm a local member, I can assure you, when the business phoned me on Saturday morning to shout at me because the car park in the Whitesands hadn't been reopened after the flooding the night before, there is a parking issue in Dumfries, and you know, we have to make sure we put in place, I think, the compensate the car park, and I think that's absolutely crucial. We have to give people a reason to come into town centres that are struggling at the moment right across Scotland. Town centres are finding it incredibly difficult, and I think restricting car parking, charging for car parking, making it difficult for people to come into the town is really not the way to support businesses in the town centre, I have to say. Okay, can I bring in Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just going back to my comments earlier, cart before the horse, and you just kind of reinforced that, I think, through what you've said in regards to take on board absolutely what you're saying. If it's for the wider regeneration of the Dumfries Town Centre and making it better for business and the shops down there, I absolutely agree with it wholeheartedly. But if you refer back to paragraph 1 of the report, this report's about to consider the options for replacement parking provision if the Whitesands project proceeds. That's why this is here in front of us. It's not about what you agree wholeheartedly what you're saying. If it's for the betterment of the regeneration of Dumfries Town Centre, that's a completely different matter. But that's not what we've got in front of us. This is about getting ready to such a point where we're actually agreeing the layout, the parking, the traffic regulation orders for a proposal that might or might not, and I think actually won't come off because there'll be a lack of funding for the Scottish Government. So therefore, it's too early, it's too soon. Absolutely, if we had a different report saying it's about the town centre regeneration, that's different altogether. That is not what this is about, and it's quite clear in regards to paragraph 1.
But if you actually read the recommendations, Ian, it actually makes it clear that we're being asked today to consider going ahead with the additional on-street car parking, irrespective of whether the Whitesands Flood Protection Scheme goes ahead, and that just seems to me utter common sense. If we have streets in Dumfries that currently have double yellow lines for no other reason, and frankly, they were always been there before the bypass, why would we not want to go ahead with removing those double yellow lines and creating additional car parking space in Dumfries, irrespective of whether or not the Whitesands project goes ahead? So the recommendations are very clear. It's not saying in relation to on-street parking that we wait until the Whitesands project goes ahead. It's very clear that we're being asked today to progress the various statutory processes and implementation of additional on-street car parking, and I think that's eminently sensible. And irrespective of whether we had a Whitesands proposal in front of us today, that's something that I think members, particularly local members, have been pushing for some time now. We know, walking around the street, there are numerous streets in Dumfries that have double yellow lines that don't need them anymore because of the bypass. Just walk out the front door along English Street and tell me along the shops in English Street there are 2 lanes there with double yellow lines both sides. There's no need for those double yellow lines. They could be removed at very, very low cost, and it would create additional car parking space in the town. So I think the recommendations are clear. It's about going ahead with the low cost element of the schemes, and then should the Whitesands project go forward, then it's about taking forward the other parts of the schemes. Okay, can I bring in Jeff, and then I've got Ian, Dick, and then John again, I think. Sorry, no, John's fine, okay. Sorry, do you want to come back in again, Jen? Sorry.
Well, Chairman, I didn't actually receive an answer from the officer about the issue of trends.
Sure, okay, I'll hand over to John.
Thanks. Surveys that were undertaken, done on Thursday and on a Saturday, we've only got 2 sets of results here, so I wouldn't really like to draw any conclusions about what the trends are. The members will be aware that we undertook parking survey of drivers who park on the Whitesands a couple of weeks ago, and also bus passengers, to try and give us a bit more information about what people who use the Whitesands perhaps as a transport destination their views are. Where do they go when they arrive at the Whitesands? Appreciate that there's shops and business on the Whitesands, but I assume that some of them, these people who park there or get the bus there will also walk up to the high street. But we really don't have any information on that, so we have undertaken those surveys. Unfortunately, I don't have the results of that so far, but I would imagine that would come out in the further reports to the committee and at the public consultation. I think that's partly about being forearmed and to be able to answer potential questions that we get from members of the public, but to demonstrate that we have actually thought about these broader aspects. With regard to the trends, sorry, I really can't give you an answer on that. Sorry.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, my query was relating to the Whitesands as well. I mean, given that we've had the fair coming twice a year for decades, once for, I think Ronnie says 3 days a year and the other one for 10 days a year, we must have a good indication about how car parking actually copes with that, because I mean, we lose all of the west side of the Whitesands, Dock Park, some of Brums Road. What happens to the cars in that instance? You know, okay, we may not have the absolute numbers, but we must have very good indications about how cars cope with it.
Thanks. This probably also answers Councillor Maitland's point earlier on, that the surveys that were undertaken identify the usage, and the first exercise we undertook was if the Whitesands is no longer there, where would these spaces displace to? And that is a similar situation with regard to when the fair comes. And that exercise did look at, you know, if you increase the usage to a higher level than was demonstrated through the surveys, that yes, you could absorb these displaced spaces within the existing parking stock within the town, but that assumes a greater percentage usage than we have at the moment. So, you know, we've gone down the line of identifying replacement provision. So essentially that's saying we can keep the same percentage usage of the spaces that we've got. With regard to the fair, that's a good question. You know, we have undertaken very limited surveys when the fair was here just a few weeks ago of some of the car parks in the vicinity of the Whitesands, and the numbers of parking there really weren't very much different from what had been on non-fair days. So, but that's one of the questions we've actually, I think, asked in these surveys that were undertaken in the last couple of weeks to drivers. If you park here regularly, where do you go when the fair is on? Because as I say, we just don't have that information, unfortunately, at the moment. So we're trying to build up a better understanding of what actually happens.
I do find it concerning we have to have a formalised survey. You know, we could have carried out these surveys over the last 5 years just to find out what's happening in these indications, just as part of the general traffic flow parking programmes within the town of Dumfries. You know, it's free information, if you like.
Just very briefly, we haven't really undertaken any surveys where we're asking drivers individually where they park, why do they park at that location, where do they go after that. We're asking these questions as part of this process in relation to the Whitesands project.
Okay, I've got Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Just in relation to John Martin's comments about traffic wardens, a bit of a wry smile in it. The new integrated service of community officers up in Stranraer, if they're anything to go by in the enthusiasm which they're enforcing parking restrictions, and having been subject to a parking ticket myself, perhaps Dumfries could actually learn something from us up there. I think I prefer the old regime.
In a car park.
It obviously was a car park you were in, Ian, rather. I'm not suggesting you park on the street and you'll get away with it or anything like that, but it does seem to be a trend that's happening at the moment. Okay, do we have Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've read through this 2 or 3 times. What I can see, recommendation 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 are all the extra car parking that we're going to get when we are not considering the car parking that we would get under the exempt item. So that means it would be 165, which is quite easy to work out. Total additional would be 230. If you take the 65 out, which is what the exempt item is, it would be 165 extra parking spaces. But nowhere in the report does it give me an indication of what the cost of of the recommendations under 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 or 2.5 would be. And I'm a bit sceptical about actually agreeing this when I don't have an idea of the cost. That we don't even have a ballpark figure of what the cost of actually what we would be looking for setting our capital allocations for future years under 2.2 and 2.3, and what kind of money we would be asking for an investment strategy bid to policy and resources, and a capital investment strategy under 2.4 and 2.5.
John, do you want to come back on that? Yep.
Recommendation 2.2 is with regard to the on-street changes. We haven't quantified the cost for that, but you might be talking maybe £5,000, that sort of area. That's a very much just a figure out there, but what we're actually potentially doing there. 2.3 is off-street changes. As I said, some of that is changes to markings. If the car park has been resurfaced or if there's patching work's being done, for example, the Lowburn Street car park is due for some patching works. We've recommended or we've identified that changing the layout and part of that car park will give us a few more spaces. The logical time to introduce that is when we actually do that patching and remark the car park. As we move into some of the other ones, that, for example, at Brooms Road, we've suggested building actual additional surface space. The cost starts to increase. I'm sorry, I can't give you a value for that. You might be £2,000 or £3,000 per space when you look at all the things, when you consider drainage that has to be incorporated, but that's at the top end of the range. Some of the other ones, it's just a few changes to curb lines. As I said earlier, we've gone through a desktop exercise to identify where we could potentially provide replacement provision to answer the question that was posed to of us, and as we've indicated in recommendations 2.2 and 2.3, that we consider they can be covered in the annual infrastructure asset class programme. 2.4, we're talking about bidding for additional capital funding, and 2.5 is again potentially bids for funding through the capital investment strategy. So 2.5 is the one with regard to the additional off-streets. As we've heard earlier, I think that would probably need to have some negotiations with the owners of these. They might not be willing to sell, might not be willing to enter into an agreement with us. But if they are, we can then take that forward as to potential funding bids.
Jim, do you want to come back in?
Sorry, that doesn't allay my fears. All I've heard is, well, the extra spaces off-street might cost us up to £2,000, and the on-street might cost us about £5,000, but we don't really know. It's just a figure picked out there. It hasn't allayed my fears that we are being asked to either commit or apply for money, and members sitting here have absolutely no idea of what it is, how much it is, for the amount of spaces that we would gain. I'm still rather skittish about actually agreeing the recommendations.
Okay, any other members? Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. It's the last time I'll come back in, but I'll just come back to the points I was making earlier, and I agree with Councillor McClung. We're agreeing to some, certainly the budget proposals, the cautions would come back to us at policy and resources at some point to be agreed. Again, by rubber stamping it here, we gain clear direction, it'll be a fait accompli, and it's definitely the cart before the horse. Recommendation 2.2, the last sentence, again refers to the Whitesands project. Fundamental, you're saying it's not really got anything to do with the Whitesands project. This would happen anyways for the betterment of the regeneration of Dumfries Town Centre. That's not how the reports, I don't think, or the recommendations read. I'd really like to consider either deferring this for further information. Further information would be on regards to what Councillor McClung's saying, further costings, and what the implications are if the Whitesands project doesn't go ahead. And that's not just being petty, that's being absolutely real and acting in a proper role of scrutiny, this committee, as it should do as well. We don't know how much this is going to cost, and in real terms, if the Whitesands project doesn't come off, what is the real economic benefit to Dumfries and Dumfries Town Centre? I'd like to see this being deferred, certainly until after we get further information, Chairman.
Well, I think there's several points there. Obviously, I think Stephen made the point earlier that in terms of the exempt item, any additional cost, depends on members' decision, will have to be reflected in the papers that come to Policy and Resources Committee on the 18th of November, so there'll have to be a revised figure for the Whitesands flood protection scheme within that. That'll have to take into account any additional costs we incur as a result of the exempt item. So I think that was very clear. I think John's made clear that what we're talking about in item 2.2 and 2.3 is about a small sum of money in terms of removing double yellow lines. And the idea of this committee can actually make it with a £27 million budget, cannot make a decision to remove double yellow lines. Frankly, I just find utterly astonishing, I have to say, and actually quite shocking that can be suggested. I think what we've got coming back in January is an additional report on the Whitesands flood protection scheme, and what I would suggest contained within that report, it would be helpful to have the feedback from the car park survey that we're undertaking in the Whitesands, as well as maybe the projected cost for the additional items for off-street parking. I wonder if that might be something we can get, because clearly we want to see what the funding would be before we actually put a bid forward to policy and resources for that. But the idea we should not go ahead with some of these schemes for £5,000 with a £27 million budget, I just don't accept, I have to say. So I wonder if that would be possible in the report that comes back in January. Okay. Okay, Jim, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to go with what Councillor Carruthers is saying, I'm actually slightly different. I would agree with yourself, Chair, that the smaller ones at 2.2 and 2.3 we could possibly leave in there, as you say, with the amount of our budget, if we can't cope with a small amount to remove yellow lines and things like that. However, 2.4 and 2.5, I would not be happy to agree, and I think they should be deferred until we actually get some sort of idea of cost. Even a ballpark figure would be helpful.
Well, I think, to be fair, 2.5 is saying that. It's that we cannot get a cost until we begin negotiations. So 2.5 is actually remitting to officers to begin negotiations, then presumably bring back the outcome of those negotiations in terms of any cost. So that's actually what 2.5 is asking us to do. Until, I mean, the reality is that there are possible car parks here that the owners won't even know at this stage that we're considering beginning negotiations with, because obviously until members give officers permission to begin those negotiations, that can't happen. So 2.5 is very clear. It's asking officers to begin negotiations to potential, and then members will have to see what the outcome of that is and what the cost would be, and then at that point we have to consider whether we want to agree to that. So I think 2.5 already agrees to that. In terms of 2.4, we're effectively saying then that in the report that comes back in January, we want to see the detailed costings around any additional work, notwithstanding the fact that we will know what the costings are around the final item today, but we want to see that in the report in January. Is that pretty much what members are saying? Yeah. Okay, Jim?
Yeah, as regards 2.5, what we're actually agreeing to there is agreeing to the negotiations, which I'm perfectly happy with, but it then says, and if required, bids for funding being made through capital investments. So the first time we'll know what the cost of that is going to be is when the bid lands on the capital investment strategy. I want to know before that goes in.
No, I think
whether we're going to go with that or not.
I think we've got a very clear message, and my interpretation is different. My interpretation is that will have to be contained within the report that comes in January, that members will need to be aware of what any cost would be, irrespective of whether it's part of the capital investment strategy, because if it's something that can simply be agreed by this committee, then we still need to see costs. That's the case of all the projects we take forward. So that's certainly my interpretation, but if the wording can be tweaked just to make that absolutely clear, that will come back in the report in January, any additional costs. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. For me, you need to add in the fact that this is not just with the Whitesands project. I would have to move a motion to go against it, to defer it. Because you're saying this is implicitly about the wider regeneration of Dumfries itself and the Dumfries Town Centre, better parking availability. That's not within the report, certainly. So that's not what we're agreeing to. It's partly there, but it's not there in full by any means. You need to add something in there, or certainly move against. I would look for a deferral for further information.
Well, tell me what you want to add in, Ian, make it a bit clearer. Because frankly, item 2.2 is to go ahead with this, irrespective of whether or not the Whitesands project goes ahead. So the idea that we should delay removing the double yellow lines, I don't understand where you're coming from. So explain to me what you want added in.
Well, it's the smaller parts that I was talking about earlier in regards to the removal of lines, the extra parking and such, like the basic stuff. When it comes to the larger stuff, which is we're looking at 2.4, 2.5, which we're agreeing to bid for additional capital funding to enable the remaining proposals for off-street parking progress for the Whitesands project capital investment strategy. That was sort of felt like the Whitesands being implicit in that. I just don't agree with that at all. I've not got enough information in front of me to agree to that, and same with 2.5. I just don't have it. Chairman, and you're saying this is about the wider, what we're actually agreeing to, the smaller projects, because it's for the betterment of Dumfries and the town centre. It says quite clear within the recommendations, this is all based now about the Whitesands project. And as far as I'm concerned, until we get more information, I don't agree with that.
Tell me what you want to add in then, Ian.
I want you to make it implicit. It's yourself that's saying I would like to make it implicit that this is in regards to this, what we're agreeing to. If we agree to the smaller project, it's not about the Whitesands. And that's for you. It's you're proposing that. It's you that's saying that, Chairman. It's not for me to add it, and it's to give you the chance to.
Well, the reality is, Ian, by agreeing to it when we don't even know if the Whitesands flood protection scheme is going to go ahead, it's implicit there that we're going ahead with the additional car parking. That goes without saying. There are 75 spaces that will be brought into play as a result of removing double yellow lines. We're agreeing to go ahead with that, irrespective of whether or not the Whitesands project goes ahead. So by definition, what we're saying is we want that to happen because it will be of benefit to the town of Dumfries, irrespective of the Whitesands goes ahead. So, I mean, if you want me to add in, this is a good thing for Dumfries, I'll add it in. But actually, you know, I think that's already very clear by virtue of the fact we're going ahead with it, irrespective of the Whitesands flood protection scheme. Okay, Jeff, do you want to come in?
One possibility is to just change the order of or the wording in 2.1. Note the potential options to secure additional parking provision within Dumfries town centre, and to provide replacement parking provision in the event of the Whitesands project. So it links the two, but decouples it.
Okay, let's go through the recommendations and see which one members wish to adopt. Okay, 2.1. To note the potential options available to provide replacement parking provision. And what was your amendment, Jeff?
Note the potential options to secure additional parking provision within Dumfries town centre.
Yep.
And to provide replacement parking provision in the event of the Whitesands project proceeding.
Okay, members happy with that? Yeah. Okay, 2.2, are we happy to agree with the work around the on-street car parking? Okay, 2.3, agree to changes to layouts of off-street car parks subject to funding being agreed within the infrastructure asset class programme when setting capital allocations for future years. So by definition, that will have to come back to members before we set the infrastructure asset class for future years. Is that the case? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So we're happy to agree that. Okay, 2.4, agree to bid for additional capital funding to enable the remaining proposals for off-street parking to be progressed as part of the Whitesands project capital investment strategy bid to be submitted to the Policy and Resources Committee. So we're clear that what that means is any additional costs as a result of the exempt item, and any other costs will come in the report in January. Is that correct? Jim? Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy with that, but that isn't actually what the recommendations say.
No, that's what I'm adding to it here. Just wanted clarification that's the case. Okay. And I think we'll add in there that this will be reported, the costs will be reported back to members as part of the Whitesands flood protection report in January. Is that, members happy with that? Okay. Okay, 2.5, agree to negotiations being undertaken with regards to potential additional car parking. And again, the costs and the negotiation will be reported back to members in January. Members happy to add that in? Yeah. Okay, 2.6, agree to update and the improvement of the traffic modelling capabilities for Dumfries Town Centre. Happy to agree that. 2.7, happy to agree that. Just on that particular issue, I wonder whether or not the issue of, it comes back to the point earlier that the on-street car parking is something we can improve irrespective of whether the Whitesands scheme goes ahead. And likewise, the signage as well is an issue that's raised on a regular basis by people, particularly people who visit the town, that there are car parks out there. It comes back to Jane's point, there are car parks out there, but the public don't know where they are because the signage is pretty poor. That's something we can obviously pursue within existing budgets, irrespective of whether the Whitesands flood protection scheme goes ahead.
What I was suggesting there, Chair, was that where we're changing car parks, the signs actually tell you the number of spaces that are available, albeit in fairly small writing, and if we're going to change the number of spaces at a car park, we'd look specifically at those car parks and changing the signing. But there is probably a wider programme, but I think it's until we've settled down and we know exactly where we're going, that might be a bit premature to go and put up lots of new signs and then everything changes again. But part of that was to maybe actually suggest that actually when you come into the town, there's a bit clearer guidance as to how to find the car parks. But to review the whole, once you start signing, you need to keep that signing going so you can actually get to the spaces, and that starts to become probably quite an expensive project in its entirety.
Sorry, Chairman, just for clarification, 2.6, I know we're past it, so I'm only looking for clarity on what that means in regards to the traffic modelling. Will that include traffic lights? And the reason I ask that is because there's a lot of traffic lights in that area, and I think it's been a number of years since they've been looked at, and I think they could be refreshed and updated to quite an extent.
The traffic modelling we're talking about is computer models to model the traffic flows within the town. As we've indicated in the report, the concern is about the additional provision at the Greensands and the limited access and egress from that area. There's only 3 roads that take you to North Avenue, and 2 of those, well, certainly 1 of those, 2 of those are one way. 2 of them, I think, have constraints on which way you can exit. So it's a concern to add additional traffic into that area without knowing what the outcome of that actually is. So the traffic modelling will inform us better, inform members better as to what the implications are if we provide extra parking in that location. Is that going to have knock-on effects with traffic movement around the whole town centre? So it's not looking at individual provision, it's the stage before that. What is the traffic modelling of the town centre network? What are the implications for changes to where the parking is? And it's also the broader changes. If we're taking away the 200 and so spaces on the Whitesands and we're distributing those around the town, what are the implications for that for traffic movement around the town? So that's what we're proposing at that point.
Okay. Thank you. Happy with that, Ian? Yeah. Okay. And finally, 2.8, are members happy to agree? Okay. I'm not conscious that it's 1:15, so you probably want to break for your lunch. No, I've never done this before. How long do we normally give them for lunch? Half an hour? Half an hour. Okay, we'll be back here at 1:45. Okay. Now on to item number 13, which is the proposed adoption of the local transport strategy. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Jeff?
Just with regard to 20-mile-an-hour speed policy, I noticed that this was agreed in May 2012, or a lot of it was agreed in May 2012. Obviously, things have moved on with regard to 20-mile-an-hour limits, particularly in urban areas and housing estates. If you think about the 20/20 scheme, etc., which an awful lot of councils are signing up for. So is our policy moving at all in line with this general direction?
Thanks. The national guidance at present is still the same as when members of this committee or the predecessor committee agreed its policy. That has been considered at the moment by Transport Scotland, but the policy at the moment is as we've worked to in the past.
Any other members? Jane?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this earlier on, but I don't really understand what is meant by breaking the transport continuous circle. Somebody could actually walk me around this continuous circle. I don't know what on earth it means. Page 398, 399.
Thanks. This predates my involvement with the local transport strategy. But, to be honest with you, I think we took this as accepted previously when a draft was consulted on by the predecessor committee, and what we've actually looked at is just updating the actions and the monitoring at the back of the report. I think what it's trying to say, I suppose, if you start at the bottom left, high elderly population, ageing population, increased dependence on concessionary travel, funding for that reducing, potentially the number of people using bus services reducing, therefore an increase in car usage, therefore an increase in dependence on the road network, and it's essentially a vicious circle. I think what it's trying to say.
Maybe vicious circle rather than continuous circle might be the best plan. Obviously, it highlights the additional pressures that if they go effectively unchallenged, then obviously going to result in a higher dependency on car use.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right, Chairman, but the idea is that these things should be actually, a picture should be easier than 1,000 words. Well, I go for the 1,000 words, frankly, in all of this. Yeah, I don't think it's helpful at all, these particular graphics.
Alistair, and then Ian.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Various procedural comments, questions, perhaps apprehensions, to flag up. 3.15, sir. Publication of the finalised local transport strategy was extended initially by the working group's expanded remit and by the local elections in May 2012. I have no problems with that, Chair, that's a matter of fact. Thereafter, it was concluded that due to the nature and scope of the document, it would be appropriate for publication to be coordinated with that of the local development plan. Now, my question there, Chair, would be, well, who concluded that? Because I certainly can't, I might be wrong, but I certainly can't remember local elected members, coming to that conclusion. That's the first one, sir. The second one is the situation 3.17. Given that the time that has elapsed since the draft local transport strategy was issued, a large number of work areas have continued, and therefore a number of the proposed interventions have been progressed or completed, and in some cases superseded by changing circumstances. Reading that, I'm beginning to wonder, well, are members becoming totally redundant? And the third one, sir, is paragraph 3.24, where the statement is made, it is not considered necessary to reconsult on the local transport strategy at this time. Well, I remain, Chair, to be convinced of that. I think it's important that, whatever strategy we finish up with, that people of Dumfries and Galloway feel that they have been adequately consulted and realise that they've been adequately consulted in the process. Apart from that, I mean, these are as I said earlier, Chair, procedural issues that I have. I mean, the substantives of the strategy, I don't have any particular issues with.
Right, thank you, Chair. If I take the first question from Councillor Geddes, it was very much the management team within Planning Environment Services that took the view that as time was progressing and we were preparing the local development plan, that had very intense traffic modelling implications for the final plan, and we felt it was appropriate and we felt it was the right way forward to do that in parallel, do the local development plan in parallel with that, just in case the outcomes from the local development plan and the modelling that went with that had any material or large change on what we were proposing through the local transport strategy.
Fair, it was obviously reported to members on a pretty regular basis, I have to say, through the Director's update on the implementation of the business plan. I was certainly conscious that every time a report came before members, it flagged this up as a red, and the lack of progress there, and obviously the fact we've got progress at long last, I think, is something that I very much welcome, but it was certainly reported that this was not progressing, I think, as quickly as was obviously originally set out in the business plan. Alistair.
Grateful to you for your comments, Chair. And let me make it clear, I don't really quibble with what Alistair has said, but it would have been helpful to have it flagged up, perhaps for the less enlightened of us, to make sure just exactly, so that we knew just exactly what what was proposed to take place. It's over and it's done with, as I say. So let's move on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Alistair. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Two things. Can you tell me at all where the North Channel Partnership fits into this strategy? And secondly, on page 383, there's an indication here that the transport proposals include a relocation of the Stranraer train station to a new site, part of comprehensive public transport interchange, etc. Could you expand on that a wee bit and whether this is a realistic proposal and what exactly it comprises?
What we have is we have Swesttrans as the regional transport partnership. Now that has the same, as you're aware, the same boundaries as the Dumfries and Galloway Council. So there's a split there between the different policies. There's the regional transport strategy and also our local transport strategy. And there's a diagram that's in the document that attempts to explain that on page 7, where it talks about the regional transport strategy, its spatial focus being interurban links connectivity. The previous draft of the local transport strategy, as far as I'm aware, didn't have reference to North Channel Partnership. Therefore, I assume that that comes under the regional transport strategy managed by Swesttrans. And I think similarly with the rail station question, that obviously there might need to be a bit of an update in the text of the main body of the report with this regard, but the rail matters are really handled by the regional transport strategy, regional transport partnerships, Swesttrans, and Dumfries and Galloway Council has little involvement in that aspect.
Effectively, what we're saying is that it's still the existing Swesttrans policy to relocate the train station, basically, until Swesttrans change that. That remains the policy. Is that Stephen?
I think the other issue for that as well is very much tied in with the realisation of the waterfront regeneration project in terms of the options for the relocation of the rail station. The committee is aware we had funding before for that, and that was released to realise Pump Prime, some of the other developments. But in terms of the master plan for the waterfront, that's still it's still there as an option for the relocation of the rail station, if that's how a development best comes together and is realised. So the LTS is still relevant in that respect, and that it is something that is in the future, is in the horizon as a potential project. Just how exactly it is delivered or what's decided in terms of the need to relocate the station is a matter for working out the kind of detail of the development proposals for the regeneration scheme.
Okay, any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, 2.1, members happy to note. Agree 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5. Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, Brian, yeah.
Just for clarification, there was, insofar as the North Channel Partnership is concerned, a member from this committee allocated a place on the North Channel Partnership. So there was always that link and reporting back.
Okay. So I think, so effectively we're looking for an update on current status of the partnership, is that? Yeah, okay. Jim?
I can tell you, I'm the member. There's never been a meeting. Not one being called.
Okay, that's the update then. Update provided, but no, we'll certainly find out the status of that organisation. Report it back to members. Okay, can we turn to item number 14? Okay, members, this is the annual report that we have around the roads maintenance review. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
I have nothing to add to the report apart from to introduce Aileen Woods, who is the author of this report, and I think this is the first time you've been to committee, Aileen. So,
good luck.
Be very kind, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can I open it up to members' questions? Ian?
It's not so much a question, but just because of the complexities within this report, I would like a quick executive summary in regards to it. I would like a brief overrun. I've read it, understand it. I see the options 1 to 5 in principle is what we're looking at and agreeing in the way forward, how much money we invest in our roads and the best way in which to invest it. But I would like to get just a quick summarisation from either somebody from the top table.
Pretty detailed report to summarise, but if I ask, can you
No.
do a summary in one paragraph for Ian's benefit?
Unfortunately, it's not the easiest thing to explain, but as you say, it is sort of prioritising the options, saying this is how we currently spend our budgets and whether there might be a better way of doing that by looking at these sort of prioritisation models. And it is financial modelling, saying we currently spend in this manner, what would be the best way to move forward with that, whether we continue in the same method that we have done previously, or we sort of change that, move things about and sort of put a different emphasis and a different focus on the way we spend the budgets.
I suppose that is it's brief but quite clear in what you're saying. So in regards to the different types of how we would do that, whether it's overlay, whether it's surface dressing, what does this kind of show as being the best way forward in which we should achieve that? I think option 2 is what they're pointing to.
Really sort of just saying exactly that if we move away from structural options, although they move things from being things that could be in a very bad condition and it can move it to a very good condition. There are other options in between. So it can be a case of we're trying not to let things fall to the very bad condition to start with, and then by preventative measures, saving things really to prolong the lifespan of the asset in general.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Probably just may rather join this view of the world sometimes. But 3.31, there is a need to review the impacts of undertaking specific sections of work against the following year's SRMCS data to ensure the investment is achieving the desired outcomes with respect to improvement of RCI. Please can I have the insurance that we're not just going to fix one bit of road because that is going to be better for our RCI and not fix another bit of road that happens to be in a worse condition but would not improve our RCI by as much?
The way the RCI works in general is that it doesn't just focus on single aspects, it is taken as an average across the entire network. So with the network being broken down completely, we don't know where they're going to survey and when. So when the company come in to undertake the annual surveys, they could one year be doing one road, one year be doing another road, and we then get the average of that. So there's by no means, although we get the results saying this road is in particularly bad condition and this is what we can do to improve that one road, that won't necessarily improve the RCI. We need to look at the whole approach right the way across the network.
It was quite a good answer, but it didn't actually answer my question. We are not going to repair a bit of road that is in a better condition than another bit of road just because it's going to affect our RCI to a better extent than not repairing the one that's in worse condition.
If I come in, Chair, yeah. It's kind of an extension of a philosophy that's been going around in asset management for roads for a while, which is not to treat the worst first in terms of the piece of the road network that looks in the worst condition, but actually trying to intervene by treating an element of the road network that if we treat now, we can treat it at lower cost per square metre and stopping it moving into a poorer condition that we would have to spend the greater cost per square metre at a more serious intervention, whether that be a thicker surfacing layer or reconstruction. So yes, the modelling work that's been used nationally just now is very much questioning those authorities that continue to just spend on worst first, so that we're dealing with the worst parts of the red elements of the network. And what it's advocating is that we actually look at, from the survey data across the whole of the network, we look at lower cost treatments over longer lengths of less damaged parts of the network.
If I can just come back at again there.
Prevention is better than cure, I think.
Yeah, I understand that, but so my rather joined this view the world has actually been proved correct this time. There could be a situation where a worse road, or a worse part of the road, is not repaired because one that's in slightly better condition would improve our RCI.
Can I have a third attempt?
We're all having a go at it, but you can try and
Charles, you next. We obviously have an issue in terms of, road safety is going to be a driver in dealing with damage to roads as well. So if there's significant damage that requires patching and such like. But what the opportunity presents is to undertake works that would repair the road to a safe condition, and then to undertake treatment works that would keep the cost down. So rather than rebuilding a section of road that's been classified as red in terms of RCI condition, give an opportunity to make the road safe and repair, and thus better investment in the resource. You appreciate how much more expensive taking a road down to sub-base level or even base course level and rebuilding back up has in comparison to surface dressing or thin overlays.
I suppose in many ways that the RCI is almost a side issue. I think more or less what we've been recommended, if we decide to go with it, is that if you intervene earlier, it's going to be cheaper because you're going to prevent the worst damage taking place by intervening at an early stage. Now, the fact that will improve the RCI is almost, if you like, secondary, but intervening early, prevention, if you like, is obviously going to be better than waiting until it's got to the stage where it's going to require a far more expensive, more substantial intervention. But the downside to that is that there will be roads that are in a poorer condition at the moment that won't get that intervention. I think that's the case until we have a substantial increase in the budget. I think that'll always be the case.
Yeah, thanks. So the short answer was my jaundiced view of the world is actually right. Yes, that could happen. That's all I was looking for, was either a yes or a no answer. And what I'm being told by 3 officers is yes, that could happen.
But for the very valid reasons why that's being recommended. It will only happen, of course, if members decide to agree to that recommendation. So it's our decision. Okay, I've got Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I would have to say that I personally find this a thought-provoking report, and interested to hear your synopsis there just a couple of minutes ago. In other words, I would translate that into the old proverb of a stitch in time, saving 9. And many's the time I've argued that in relation to other aspects of this department's infrastructure, particularly in relation to harbours and things like that. But irrespective, Chair, as I say, I think it is thought-provoking. The recommendations are soundly based. My only concern, Chair, is going back to what I said earlier today at another item of business. I mean, to me, it would have been good if all of our cohort, all 47 of us, were able to, listen to some form of presentation, the discussion, etc., and then at the end of the day, this committee could have taken the decision, because inevitably, Chair, all 47 members, and particularly members representing rural wards, will be affected to a greater or lesser extent by the terms of this report. So, something of a cri de coeur, sir. Can we ask, perhaps in the future, that we bear that in mind? I'm not trying to hold up the decision-making process, Chair. But can I ask that we bear that in mind for the future, as heightening the impact and the effectiveness for elected members of a report of this quality, let me say. Thank you.
Suggestion, yep. Okay, I've got Jeff next.
Can I just have a bit of definition about what unclassified roads are in urban and rural? Does that include the roads within housing scheme? Is that within the urban? And to what extent are the number of vehicles travelling across these roads taken into account when prioritising them? Because obviously in a housing scheme you might have hundreds of vehicle movements across a road within a day, whereas in a rural area, for example, you may only have 4 or 5 going over there. So how do we actually weight it in terms of that?
Unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach with the classifications, and that's where it does further complicate matters. That, as you say, a rural U-class road could have minimal traffic on it, but then an urban U-class road in the middle of a housing estate, which is exactly the definition of it, could have an enormous amount of traffic. And this is where the sort of scheme prioritisation comes into play with things, which also sort of answers Councillor McClung's question as well, that because things have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, there isn't a case of this is what we're going to do wholly with U-class roads. We really need to look at each U-class road and say, right, what is the volume of traffic that's going here? What would be the appropriate treatment? And how that would then factor into any scheme prioritisation methods.
Jeff?
Just on that, in terms of the traffic calming in the housing estates, obviously speed bumps put in there in order to calm the traffic down, but they also, in my experiences, Alistair will probably testify, I'm always whinging on about this, that they actually seem to be damaging the road, presumably because of the way in which the weight of the cars is thrown onto the edges. So what you can end up with is a speed bump there. You've been getting a very small pothole, and that gradually grows bigger and bigger across the speed bump, the area of the road. And because you've got a speed bump there, that actually makes it even worse in terms of the damage which can be done. So I presume that will be taken into account as well when weighting this.
sorry, again, unfortunately, the way the survey is undertaken, it does take speed bumps into consideration to a point because it can't survey that portion of road. So they're the ones that really have to be looked at individually by our colleagues in DG first, going out, inspecting these situations and seeing what treatment would be sufficient. And with the U-class network being so extensive and being at the rural and urban split with that, looking at these individually, and if there are in areas of traffic calming, consider that as an aspect as the course of the treatment.
A bid from Jeff for funding for Brownwood Loaning speed bumps, I think. That's okay. Ian Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I would just commend the officer for the quality of this report. It's certainly one I'll keep for future reference. I think it's excellent. Just on the substantives of the recommendations, I would have no hesitation in supporting a regime of planned preventative maintenance. It's certainly one we've, over the last couple of administrations, tried to address to one extent or another, both in buildings and roads. And I think it's recognition of the of the council's attempts to do that, that the quality of our road repairs and our drainage has improved substantially. So supportive of the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Ian. I've got George and then Ian Crothers.
Really just a follow on from what Ian's saying, you know, that we all know that water's probably the biggest enemy of the roads. Are we now doing a regular clean of offlets and rural roads? Are they done regularly? Are they just done on demand when there are floods, or what's the setup with that? And obviously, I presume it's actually costing more nowadays than it was. I'm hoping we're spending more or doing more work to the offlets on the sides of roads than we were, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, there is a regular programme of cleaning offlets, but we don't have the funds available to clean every single offlet every single year. But we're having a more targeted approach in cleaning our offlets. Through our roads inspections, safety inspections, we're trying to treat those areas that are worst affected. There was a report went to DG First Management Committee on road drainage and the approach we're taking to road drainage. And it's not just offlets, it's water that emanates from private land onto the road as well. So we've got a different way of tackling that. But we certainly aren't doing every single offlet every year. Years ago, perhaps you're alluding to the linesman that used to clean the offlets years ago. I think that was perhaps a different case, you know, in point. We've got a completely different regime now, where a lot of them are done by mechanical means, mini diggers, etc., which is a lot quicker and I think a lot more efficient. It's not just a case of dealing with the offlets as well. The guys that are doing this work also check the cross drains as well on the roads while they're doing that.
Got Ian Crothers and then back to Ian Dick.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for letting me back in. Option 2, a couple of questions. Option 2, why option 2? Why not option 4? When I looked at it, I thought option 4, and we put that extra money in. Last time we had a report similar to this, it was certainly different, but it showed, I think it was back May 2010, backlog of £160 million to bring it back up, bring the council roads infrastructure up to where it should be. We'd like to see details on that. What is the actual investment plan? What would it have took to bring our roads up to the standard they should actually be at? That's pretty much it. The rural, I suppose the other thing, that we've already got a policy on rural lifeline links and the urban roads in regards to that. If we do agree option 2, what effect will that have on that actual policy that's in place at the moment? So because I've seen a major change, certainly for the better in Andy and Estill, but across Dumfries and Galloway, the improvements here. So what effect does it, looking at this new approach, does that still align with that previous policy decision made? And option 4, that's the 2 main points I've got in option 4. Why not option 4? Why have the officers recommended option 2?
The recommendation of option 2 to start with is really just so that we're looking at exactly the same budget that we've got allocated at present. So it really is just the reportioning the existing monies. Ideally, yes, if there could be an option to go with option 4 with an increase in the budget, we could then target the RCI in a more specific manner and hopefully get an improvement. But as I say, it was purely just to model what we've got and see what we can do with the money we've currently got allocated and what we can do with that in order to be able to improve condition.
Presumably, if members wish to pursue that, they can pursue it through their budget options. But that, I mean, a 20% increase would be somewhere in the region of £1.5 million from the capital budget. So obviously, members would have to decide exactly which projects they would remove to fund that.
There was a
Sorry,
second
Stephen,
part.
do you want to come in?
Yeah, if I could just come back in on the second part, in terms of the impact on the rural lifeline links. The report we took this morning on the capital programme and looking forward, as well as the £9 million in the baseline, identifies that the report to next week's policy and resources will also consider an extra £500,000 in the roads maintenance programme. Now that's what's happened over the past 2 financial years, including this one, is there's been an extra £1 million put into the programme on a 1-year basis for the rural lifeline links and the residential urban roads to particularly target problem areas there with kind of short lengths of overlay, short kind of contract patching, short areas of dressing, surface dressing. And that will be continued in terms of the bid. The bid is going forward to Policy and Resources next week, ask for an extra £500,000, but that takes into account the fact that the baseline budget actually went from £8.5 to £9 million for infrastructure. So there is still the continuation of that additional allocation, but that will have been factored into the assessment of the figures there.
Okay, back to Ian Dick.
Yeah, just one of the reasons why I was always supportive of a planned preventative maintenance regime was that ideally, if it's properly managed, you get the situation where the revenue costs should have themselves come down in future. Buildings and roads are not deteriorating in the way in which they perhaps had been when you didn't have that maintenance budget. Just one thing you mentioned, Charles, on drainage and the fact that we use mechanicals. Can I make a plea that when our men are going out and they're cutting the drains anew, that if there are British Telecom cables just slightly under the ground, that they're not cutting through them, or if they are, could they please report them? Because it's happened up on a couple of occasions over a number of years up in my area, and I suspect that might well be the case elsewhere.
I can do that, Chair. The men wouldn't deliberately go through a BT cable. There's an abundance of these now. BT seem to come along and make a temporary repair and lie the cable on the verge. It's something that happens very, very frequently. I have a network manager who reports all these cables directly to BT in the regular meetings he has with public utilities. It's not just the items of plant we use for drainage that cause issues. It's also our grass cutting plant as well. And they're very, very difficult to avoid, some of these cables. But I'll take the point on board, Chair.
Craig, do you want to come in?
Yes, Chair, thank you. On table 1 there, it shows that all the classifications of roads we have in Dumfries and Galloway are above the Scottish average, but more so, especially the unclassified roads. There is quite a difference in percentage-wise there. And it clearly sets out in 3.17 that if we continue the way we're going, even with the same budget spend, the RCI and the condition of the roads will get worse. So it's obvious that we do need to have a change in the way that we're looking to treat the condition of the roads and the way we're moving, because it is a substantive change in how we're going to put the spend moving from the strengthening to the service treatment, and it's quite a substantial amount. So, and with the graphs that it shows, it does actually show the difference in the table 2 graph that we have over the page. So, although I agree in one sense that it would be great to spend a lot more money on option 4 with the 20% is the only way to actually improve the road conditions according to the report that we have in front of us. But of course we all know the constraints we're under economically at the moment. So I welcome the change and I would hope, and I'm sure it'll turn out, if members agree to this today, over the 12 months through the monitoring reports that we have, we'll be able to see the effects that will actually have, and that will be able to influence future decisions as we're going forward as well.
Do you have any other members? Come to the recommendations. Okay, members happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Okay, are members happy to agree to option 2? Ian?
I mean, I'm happy to agree to option 2, but that's we're really looking at it as a methodology more than anything, aren't we? And I think for what you were saying earlier, any increase above that, as in option 3 and option 4, we could have potentially looked at as potentially in about $750,000 for each option we go up, and through the budget process we can look at that on as an individual group basis. So happy to agree with the methodology and apply the option 2, better ways of working, but certainly I think through the budget process we should be looking at possibly enhancing that.
Okay, 2.5, we're happy to note. Okay, and we're happy to note 2.6. Okay, thank you very much, and thanks very much for a very comprehensive report. Okay, can we turn to item number 16, which is the 15? I've done it again, yeah, that's what am I trying to miss out? Item number 15. Okay, item 15, Scottish Local Authority Loan Fund. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, could I open it up to members' questions? Alistair and then Ian Crothers.
Thanks, Chair. Why is it that, in the south of, in relation to the proposed South of Scotland Loan Fund, Chair, it's to be operated by Scottish Enterprise and we're not getting the benefit of the consortium of local authorities that the other 2 loan funds are getting? In other words, well, no. Bearing in mind the meeting's been recorded, no, I won't. I'll simply leave the question, Chair, and hope for an answer.
I think that paragraph refers to who currently operates the existing loan funds. So the current South of Scotland Loan Fund is operated by Scottish Enterprise. So that's who currently operates the 3 existing loan funds. Is that right in saying? So there are 3 funds at the moment: the West of Scotland, East of Scotland, the South of Scotland, and the one in the South of Scotland, which is I think something that came as a result of foot and mouth, is operated by Scottish Enterprise. So the idea is actually effective to remove that from Scottish Enterprise and put it as part of a wider Scottish Local Authority Loan Fund. Sorry, Alistair. Yeah.
Great. I'm very grateful for that, sir, because I was apprehensive, as I say. I think that was readily apparent, about a continued ongoing involvement of this particular organisation. Thank you.
Given your apprehension, then it's obviously a very good way forward, I suspect. Okay. Any other members? Oh, sorry, Ian. Sorry.
No, that's fine, Chairman. That was my understanding what you've said, how it would work. The only thing kind of lacked it from my perspective was possible member involvement. Should be a member. We've done it with different organisations, whether it's a flag or the lag or whatever, different things. So there should actually be a member sitting at this in regards to it and see how it works. Catalyst was actually another word that sprung to my mind, and I wouldn't have wanted to ended up in the same circumstances what they did, certainly. So, I mean, I wasn't involved in that when it got started up, and the direction it actually landed, headed in and ended up at, and finally we're no longer a part of that system. What was formalised way back in the early 2000s, I think it was 2003, somewhere about there. But no, I agree with it in principle, see if it works. I'd like to see how it does work, but I think it should be possible a member, whether it's a chairman, vice chairman, whoever a member for this committee should actually be strategically set on that board as well.
I think that's the level of detail I'll be looking to bring back in January, if we're agreed in principle. It's certainly a valid concern. I think there are 2 issues here, one about who represents the council on whatever boards, but also whoever is involved in making decisions on grants has to have the right expertise and knowledge around business grants as well. So there's 2 sides to this that will be covered in the next report.
So effectively, we're going to get a further report on the detail if we agree this in principle today. Okay, any other members? Okay, we'll turn to the recommendations. Members happy to note 2.1, agree to the scheme in principle, and 2.3, agree to receive a further report with that level of detail in. Okay, thanks very much. Second go, item number 16, Central Avenue, Gretna Public Realm Enhancements. It's obviously been to Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee, and there's recommendations there from the Area Committee for this committee to consider today. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Okay, Jane and then Ian.
I think I understand this. It's bringing monies forward, but on the other hand, we must remember, I presume, that it will curtail our ability to bring things forward in the economic development tranche of cash in year 3. Is that right? So what we're basically saying is that's fine. You can have it now, but there will be less money available for other projects.
That's right. I mean, the year 3, I think there's an allocation, an indicative allocation of £1.5 million. So obviously, by definition, bringing 400,000 of that forward will reduce that that balance in future years, depending, of course, on what members agree as far as future budgets are concerned. Yeah, that's certainly the case. Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a point that Craig actually, Councillor Peacock picked up at the area committee in regards to this, if I'm picking this up right, that this was actually an under allocation originally, and this is actually reflecting. It's bringing it up to what should have been allocated the first time. So, I mean, that was certainly reflected when it went to Annandale and Estill area committee. And it was just to recognise that, I think we looked at the core-eyes allocation. I thought that was in correlation to this as well. 450k. I thought it was looking at this in particular, but just to recognise that this is really this is a project that was agreed a while ago in regards to funding, but it was underfunded, and this is it just coming to fruition now. But certainly, Councillor Peacock picked up on that, the area committee.
Okay, so made point. Any other members? Jim?
Yeah, if I can just have clarification, the answer that was gave to Councillor Maitland. Yes, I would agree that it would be £400,000 less in year 3, but I'm busy trying to look for the actual table that was tabled this morning. It was 500,000 for Dumfries, 500,000 for Stranraer, and 500,000 for the Annan area. So I take it this 400,000 would be coming off the potential allocation for the Annan area and not off the Dumfries area. Sorry, the Dumfries, Nithsdale and Stranraer area.
No, because the table I think you're referring to in the earlier report had no allocations for 2017-18, because obviously we set capital budget last year for 3 years. So I think the table shows 2017-18 overall balance of £1.5 million, but no individual allocations for any individual project. So obviously the £400,000 will come from the £1.5 million balance, leaving £1.1 million for members to consider as part of your budget process. But there was no allocation for 17-18 as far as I can recall.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I've now got a hold of it. I just wanted to make sure that the other areas weren't going to lose out because Annan was getting 400,000, but no, that's okay.
Ronnie, yeah.
Just as a long-standing Annandale and Estill councillor, and I had the pleasure of being alongside Craig's dad way back in '79, and been pushing for the redevelopment of Gretna since that time. So I really welcome this for the people of Gretna who've had tremendous patience, and it's an excellent project, and I'm sure it'll be welcomed that it's getting done in one phase.
Took you a while, Ronnie, to get there, but we get there in the end. It's a positive project, and I think one that will make a significant difference to that particular area of Gretna. Okay, any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? We're happy to note the recommendations from Annandale and Estill Area Committee. Okay, we're happy to agree the project, set out in 4.3, note the estimated cost, and agree the additional fundings brought forward. 2.4, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, can we turn now to item number 17, which is another publicly owned project, and this time it's based on recommendations from a public consultation and Whitesands Area Committee around the Stranraer Gateway project. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members? Graham.
Thank you, Chair. First time speaking today. This is the report that came in front of the Whitesands Area Committee, as it says. I can't say it's factually incorrect because it doesn't contain many facts. We were amazed when it came in front of us at the Area Committee. I think it's one of the poorest reports that has ever came in front of me in my time, EEI or PHE or whatever it's been called in its multiple lives. Yes, Billet was number 1, Bridge of Aird was number 2. We all got our heads round that in Whitesands. But we weren't told how many people voted, what the extent of the consultation was, the parameters. We were informed by an officer at the committee that there's sufficient capital to do these two. We weren't told exactly how much Billet would cost, Bridge of Aird would cost. If my memory serves me correctly, Billet was about 70,000. This was following questioning officers, and it should have been contained in the report. And Bridge of Aird was about 30,000. The report also states that the Whitesands Area Committee approved. Well, that is right. That is not incorrect either. We did approve it, but it wasn't just 100% unanimous. 4 were for, 3 were against, and there was 1 abstention. So, you know, if we're going to bring these things forward, as I say, I can't lambast the author or the director or anybody else because there's nothing factually incorrect in the report, but it's just the lack of information. It's sad. We've argued all day, all morning about other reports that came in front of us and there wasn't sufficient information. There's very little information in this one. I'll be consistent. At the area committee, I said that I can't remember the exact figures, but I think there was about 70 people in total involved in the consultation. No doubt Jason will be coming in behind me and he'll give you the exact figures again. But the consultation wasn't large enough to say the whole of Stranraer were behind these in any manner of means. I also said, owing to that, and owing to the fact that the projects were not value for money, I moved, or Willie Scobie, I think, moved, somebody moved, and we moved, we didn't proceed with them. And I'll just draw your attention very simply. You've all driven into Stranraer. There's the old bridge there. Basically, for 30 grand, we're planting about a dozen poplar trees, I presume they are of that type, tidying up a bit of ground, steam cleaning the face of the brick bridge and putting a fence around it that quite frankly would hardly even keep sheep in, not that there's any sheep to keep in. And we're spending 30 grand for that, and I do not think that is worth the money. I think it is poor value, and I would move that we don't progress this today. Thank you.
Jane?
Thanks very much. I read this and was actually surprised. I couldn't comment about what Wigtonshire Area Committee did. I hadn't understood, but I looked at the report and I honestly thought that in terms of impact, Chairman, what we're trying to do to get an impact and really for people to think this is quite something and we're coming to somewhere special and interesting or innovative or have relevance, I don't think we're getting value for money for the public pound in that. I'd prefer to put £100,000 towards the Townscape Heritage Initiative, which I think you'd probably have a lot more bang for your bucks if we put it towards that. I don't know whether we're allowed to do that, but I think you'd get better quality and result and improvement in the fabric of Stranraer. So I'm quite happy to second Councillor Foster.
Okay, I'll bring in probably the opposing view, Councillor Dick and Councillor McClung.
Maybe the 100 grand could come out of the Stewartry budget. The reason I actually voted for this at the area committee, I have some sympathy with what Graham says in terms of costing, but if you come into Stranraer on either side, the 77, but particularly the 75 at that railway bridge, it's an eyesore and it comprises the old railway bridge, which is in a relatively dishevelled condition at the moment, followed by an area which used to house a petrol station and is now a piece of concrete with weeds growing out of it that often sees cars up for sale. And I personally, looking at this, I voted for it and I'd vote for it again because I think it would be a massive improvement to what is the first impression of coming in off the 75 into Stranraer. And I'll be honest, I'm quite taken with the building proposition for the 77. So I'll be consistent too and move the recommendations.
Jim?
I'll be utterly consistent. It was me that proposed the motion to actually go ahead with the area committee, so I'll second Councillor Dick.
Okay. Can I bring in Roberta?
Since I agreed with the plans, both Barriette and the entrance, I think what Councillor Foster is forgetting that we are trying to promote Stranraer as a marine destination, and for 20, 30 years it's been an absolute mess coming in, and then you come to the beautiful school. So I think this will enhance entering Stranraer, and I look forward to seeing it being done, and I voted also for it.
Graham, do you want to come back in?
Just basically an answer to Roberta. With all this fun and argument at the Wigton Area Committee, but How a post and rail fence designates a marine designation, I will never know. Basically, a guy with a steam cleaner could clean off the facing of the bricks in the bridge, a few loads of topsoil and a few trees planted would tidy up. I agree with Ian that it's not the tidiest places to drive by, but that's because that certain section of road is privately owned. Now, not the road, the bit where we're planting the trees, at the roadside, sorry, should I say. But we could tidy it up, but for 30,000, I would go out and do it myself for 20.
Yeah, can I get some clarification on this? Councillor Foster was saying about the money for a bit of a tree and a bush and a bit of steam cleaning and that. But I noticed in the diagrams, there's probably work being done in the pathway for cyclists and as well as pedestrians. Does that come into the costings as well?
Yes, the whole of that gateway is being tidied over, so there is an element of that included in the work.
Okay, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. Well, let me say that I was the abstention when it came before the area committee. I was even more jaundiced that particular morning than I normally am, and my comment to myself as well, I can get on and make a kirk or a mill of it. And then I thought afterwards, well, you really didn't do Stranraer any favours. The town that I've lived longest in by a length of a country mile during the course of my life. And the blunt fact of the matter is that it's about time that we stopped, sort of trying to employ Fabian tactics and get on and did the business. In fact, the last time this came up, I was extremely impressed with the comment that Councillor Crothers made, and seconded by the Vice Chair, when he made the point that you can fall out about things in Annandale and Eskdale, but at the end of the day, the overriding criterion was that, everybody pulled together, when they considered it to be in the best interests of the district. Chair, Stranraer desperately needs all the help it can get. We've talked about this for long enough. It's about time they get on and do the business, not only here, the town centre and the seafront as well. It's the second biggest town in the region, and at the end of the day, we owe it a lot, or some of us do anyway.
Agree with that 100%, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. I have some sympathy with Councillor Foster's remark about what this actually does to make Stranraer a marine leisure destination. However, I would just also point out that spending a proposed 100,000 on a trailer stage didn't really make any difference for a marine leisure destination. I think we should actually just move to the question.
Bring in one final time, unless you want to declare an interest because you're going to bid for the tender for this. I'm not too sure, but
Hasn't been awarded yet, Chair, so I'm still safe to speak, I presume. No, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think that what they're proposing at the Air is a disproportionate amount of money for what we're getting. In other words, we're getting no bang for our buck at all, and I would rather see that money spent somewhere else in Stranraer. But that's a personal opinion.
okay, members, we have a motion from Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Maitland, effectively not to go ahead with the project. Is that so? Okay, and we have an amendment from Councillor Dick, seconded by Councillor McClung, to go with the recommendation. Go to the vote.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Peacock.
Amendment.
Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Carson. Oh, apologies. Councillor Collins. Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McClung.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor Nichol. No. Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Prentice.
Motion.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Amendment.
That is, the amendment carries 13-3.
Thank you very much, members. Okay, can we turn to item number 19? I've obviously been informed that Item number 20 contains information that is exempt, so happy to take that item as an exempt item. I don't think there's any members of the public here anyway, but